I just have to.
I also want to mention, we're going to go over like fake blood squibs. So if anyone's queasy around blood, it's fake, but they're going to be showing images like the one on screen.
It doesn't help. I'm queasy, and even though I know it's fake, it's like,
Yeah, but you get queasy even if it's like an awful looking blood. Like it doesn't look anything like it. Looks like candy or something.
Well, that's because I can't see well, Coda. So everything that's like looks bloody.
Right. But yeah, so if anybody is uneasy with that type of stuff, we're going to be showing that today, some of the pictures, which is actually the first thing we're talking about. Is bullet squibs, they're called. And there's two versions of these. The more professional ones are, what a bullet squib is makes it look like a bullet hits the person and the blood spews out in one direction or the other, depending on where the bullet hit. And so you'll see this a lot in independent films and feature films, big movies. They'll have the blood either go out the back where the bullet went through, or they'll have the bullet go out the front where they got shot. And it can either explode out or it just kind of leaks out and makes a stain on their shirt. And so the first way that this is done, the more professional way this is done, is using a device sort of like this. Let me see if I can open this. It's like a little bullet squib. On the back of it, it's a little piece of metal to protect the person that is wearing it. It's a metal plate. And then there's a little bit of like explosive material, the same kind of thing you would see if you had a stick of dynamite, but on a very smaller scale. And then the little blood pack, which you can see in the image right there. And the blood pack will be made however the production company decided to make it. The professional ones, because they have that explosive material in between, that is why there's that metal plate to protect the person. Because if they weren't wearing the metal plate, it could damage their skin, burn them, or something like that.
We sent a video of the guy doing it on the ground, and I can only imagine that near someone's body. Like, you got to really trust people to let them put that on you, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and because it uses explosive material, it requires a pyrotechnic license and sometimes a special effects license as well to use these. So if you're going to try to use the professional ones, you actually need a licensed person on set to help set them up, put them on the people, make sure everything's safe, so that nothing goes wrong, because these can rip through clothes. So they do tend to look a little bit more realistic than the alternate version, which we'll talk about in a second. They can rip through clothes and they explode outward pretty drastically. So if you're trying to get like a big gush of blood, you might want to use something like this, but you would have to have somebody that has a license for it. You can't just go ahead and grab these and use them yourself. You need to make sure that all the requirements are met, so there's no safety hazards and things like that. Then there's the less dangerous one, which is the air compressed squib, or air squibs that they're sometimes called. And these are set up in different ways. This is more of a do-it-yourself version where you can create it at home. The guy is wearing this tubing on him, and he has a back brace that's holding it on, and he tapes it down to his shirt. And basically what's going to happen is he's going to have blood, a garden hose sprayer, or something that can get some air pressure in the other side of the tube. And he's going to cut a hole at the end of the tube so that whenever he gets quote unquote shot, the blood will spew out when somebody pulls the trigger, pretty much, and launches the blood out of the other side of the tube. Because all that air pressure is built up, it'll send the blood up the tube and flying out the other end where the hole is. Compressed air can still be dangerous if used incorrectly, or especially if it's used near somebody's eye. So you always want to be careful with that. Make sure the hole is pointing outward and not upward, because you don't want it to spray up into somebody's eye. Any kind of pressure towards somebody's eye can blind them or severely damage it. But typically, if you're using them correctly, if you're being safe with it, you're not really going to have too much of an issue. But you still definitely want to always be safe when using something like this, especially if it's homemade and it's not something that you bought. Either way, you always want to be sure that you're making sure everything's good to go and nothing's going to be going wrong. So doing tests with it is always a good thing. So this actually comes from independent version. This actually comes from a channel called Chin Fat, which is the letter B in the syllabus. He goes over how to make it at home using that guy's method on screen. And the video is called Gun Squib Tutorial Part 1, How to Make a Gunshot Bullet Hit for Indie Movies. And basically what you're gonna need is you're gonna need some 3-4-inch hose, where you can get it at like a local Home Depot or Lowe's or some other home department store. A hose clamp, which looks like that. 1/2 inch of an insert plug, so you can plug in the other side, so there's no air escaping the other side of the tube. And then something like a garden hose sprayer. Let me open that so it's a little bit bigger. Garden hose sprayer that there's some that are automatic and some that have like a manual pump. And basically what you're gonna do is, with this kind, you would take that handle on the top and pump it up and down as if you were inflating a tire or something like that. So it's gonna build up some pressure in there. And then whenever you squeeze that trigger on the handle, as if you were gonna spray out water from the hose, if you have the blood in there, it'll spray out the blood instead, which is what we want when we're making our own version of this thing. All put together, it's gonna look something like this. So you're gonna have the plug on one side. It can either be metal or it can be the plastic one we saw, as long as it works for your purposes. You're going to put the little clamp on that end and tighten it down as tight as you can get it, so that the plug doesn't go out whenever the air pressure is released. It doesn't spray out that side. And then what he's gonna do is he's gonna cut a hole somewhere around this area on the side where he's going to have the blood shoot out at. And on the other side of this hose, he's gonna attach it to that garden hose sprayer to get that air pressure built up. And then whenever he squeezes the trigger, or somebody else squeezes the trigger, as if they were going to spray out from the hose, it's going to shoot the blood up the tube and out the hole, making it look like it's coming out of that person's body whenever they attach it to them. So, I mean, and it depends on, like, obviously there's different ways to do the color, the recipe of the fake blood to make it look more darker or less dark, or however you want to do it. But if you do it right, it can look something like this. The guy's wearing a tube. They have him having an undershirt, and he has the tube and the back brace and some tape on his body, or not on his body, but on the shirt, the undershirt, holding the tube there. And then, when they see that the fake shot is, they pull the trigger, make it look like it's shooting out of the shirt. Now, because it's just air that's shooting out the blood, you're going to need to pre-make a hole in the shirt before you use this, because otherwise the blood will all get stopped by the shirt and just make like a small stain on the shirt, which is sometimes people like doing that instead. They don't want blood gushing out everywhere, especially if they're trying to do a more like a PG-13 or something kind of rating. They might not want there to be too much blood shooting out everywhere. So they'll just have it be like a little stain that goes on the shirt sometimes, or they might just want it that way because if somebody's getting a knife stab or something like that, there's another way to use the blood where it doesn't have to like gush out of the body.
Some movies also make the blood look a little faker to get more of a PG rating. Like I know some movies had to make their blood look faker so they wouldn't get an MA rating or something like that as well.
And with fake blood, the other thing you have to think about is that certain recipes, certain ones, if you buy them online or if you make it at home yourself, some of them will stain clothes and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're not using clothes that, or you're not in an area that you don't want to have stained, or you're making sure to take the precautions so that if blood gets anywhere, it's not going to stain the location or the person.
There are some recipes that don't stain, but they say that those also are not safe to put in your mouth as well. Like some recipes you can put in your mouth, some you cannot. Some are not edible, or some are not safe around the eyes or around the mouth area. But those are the ones that tend to look more realistic because they have more things in them. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
What the beetroot juice?
Beet juice?
Yes. That comes close?
I don't know, maybe.
Cranberry juice.
Cranberry juice?
We
Beet
did.
juice.
I do know like there's a ton of
Smells
different
stuff.
recipes and lots of different people use different things. We'll get into fake blood in a second, but like there's so many different variations. It just depends on preference on what you want. And
One
it
of the
also
videos-
depends on what you're using it for. You know, some people want it to stick to a wall while others want it to just like shoot out of a body or
Some
be on the
look
floor as a
older,
puddle.
more coagulated. Others want it to look like more bright. So that's another thing. Like if you want it to look like old blood or new blood. I also heard like one of the videos we shared was like the most famous recipes, and I think they said something about how cranberry juice gets a little too bright red, and then you kind of have to mix it with a few other things. But yeah, there's so many variations out there. They showed like I think like 6 or 7, and those are just a few of the basic ones or the more used ones. But there's dozens out there.
Yeah, and then there's cranberry juice, and I think it's like you mix it with like syrup or something like that. Because I know when I did the scene for Kill Mary, I didn't bring my fake blood with me, so we used water and food coloring or food dye.
Mhm.
We just used a lot to make it really dark, which it looked good, but the problem was it dried and then it started to fade. So like, I mean, you guys saw the trailer for it. Like she was covered in it, but then when it dried, like it's water, so like all that color it didn't really stain at all.
That's one of the things that almost every single recipe had was like I think they put like was it cornstarch? Like
corn syrup. That's it.
Yeah,
corn
they
Yeah.
put it so that it would look less watery and a little more and thicken a little better, but not. I think that one also stains a little bit more, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's I think some of those things there's no way around it. The best recipes everyone said always stains, so they always say like have extra clothes prepared or be ready to do multiple of the same clothes, because more often than not the more realistic looking ones will stain, was what we heard a lot.
Yeah, if you want it to look like real blood, it has to be pretty dark. It has to be pretty opaque, and it has to be kind of a little thicker than water, but not too. Like,
But
not
it does
crazy
suck because
drastically.
like if you're using it like you did in your trailer around the mouth, you can only use certain types, and those tend to be a little brighter, a little more liquidy, or a little because you can't ingest certain things. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind, which kind of makes it kind of hard.
It's weird because real blood isn't hard to get out. Like it comes right out. Like
Yeah.
Depends on
But-
where you stain it. I'll just say that. Depends on where you stain it.
Yeah. But don't do the carry, the animal blood. Don't do that. That's disgusting. That's gross.
But that wasn't real animal blood, right?
Pig blood, I think. I don't know.
No, I'm pretty sure that was. I don't want to know. Even if it was, I don't want to know.
All right. But yeah, so also if you guys look in the syllabus, the video, I think it's the video C. Priscilla also shared it with the WhatsApp group, but you can also use squibs because they are basically just like a little tiny stick of dynamite. You can use them for like ground explosions to make dirt pop out of the ground if you have some loose dirt above it. But again, you would need a pyrotechnics license or something like that to make sure it's all safe and you're not doing anything illegally, because you are using explosives where that comes in.
Yeah. On the explosive thing that you were mentioning right at the beginning, right? Is that triggered by some sort of
this one? Oh, this
yeah.
one? Yeah.
Yeah, that one. How is it triggered? It's like somebody has to hit it on the spot, or is it like triggered by some remote thing?
Some of them have they're wired. They still have some kind of wire going to them where they if you've ever seen somebody use an actual explosive on set, it's kind of the same thing. You can have like a little trigger pump, a little miniature one, or it could be a wireless trigger. So it could be the same thing. Like there's a little button or a pump or whatever you want to use to trigger it.
Is that a wire
to
going out?
that?
I see something going out on the right side. Is that the wire?
Yeah, that would be where it connects to whatever's going to make it go off.
Mhm. I see.
So it's usually not as long as the tubing you would use for the air powered one, because it's usually just somebody really close by, or it's somebody doing it wirelessly.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of the same thing as, saying like fire in the hole and then shoving down that thing and all this stuff, all the explosions start going off, but on a much, much, much smaller scale.
Yeah, I think they have like a percentage of explosives that they use, so which is kind of what the pyrotechnics guy, he kind of knows exactly how much to put
Right.
and how much explosion you can get. So yeah, sometimes I think explosive kind of sounds pretty scary, but
Right.
I'm
Yeah. And it's
sure.
like it sounds scarier than it is. If you guys
Yeah.
watch the videos, you'll see like it blows out the shirt a little bit, but shirts aren't really
Yeah.
made of too strong a material, and the explosion doesn't start any kind of fire or anything. So it's not like a big,
More
huge
often than not, they're also using
hot
button
thing.
up on top of another shirt to cover that. So for a button up to like pop open, that's not that hard. Trust me, they're really annoying. So that's
Well,
also
the
another.
squibs can actually rip through the clothing. Like it doesn't matter where it is; it actually rips through if it's strong
No,
enough.
I know, but like button ups tend to be a little thinner depending on the material. So that also makes it like if it's makes a bigger rip sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes like they have those firecrackers, like a tiny ones, which is kind of you can pinch it and that kind of explodes, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's not harmful, but sounds pretty scary.
Yeah, it is kind of like a firecracker can be scary, but it's not really that. You could throw it at somebody and it's not really gonna damage them.
It's just always good to go into anything that explodes with the mentality of I'm gonna just take a little precaution, even if it is a tiny explosion. You can,
Yeah, I know some of them. I know back in the day, like they would have a set of squibs like on a vest to like kind of protect them a little bit.
Kind
Because
of
like
like
it would
a
look
bulletproof vest sort of thing, right?
not really, yeah, but not really bullet because those are thick. But you can like if you watch those really really old 90s and 80s movies, like just watch a Die Hard movie and like you can see like their chest will be all bulked up and it's like oh god, and then it'll blow up, but it looks like he's wearing like a vest or something like that. But it's like if they'll shoot a machine gun where there's like a lot of rounds going, like it'll be like a lot of squibs attached to a vest and they'll all go off simultaneously and stuff to make it look like he's shooting them like multiple times.
Right.
But you could see his chest is like it got it enlarged and stuff. It's like oh god. They've changed. I don't know the process now. Like it's like a combination of like the CGI and practical effects too, but I guess they pick the moment when they want to go back and forth.
Yeah, and I think mainly now with like the bigger budget movies, if they're not just trying to use practical effects just because, then they use them more for just like a reference point.
Yeah,
like this is where the bullet is, this is how it interacts, and then do the rest in visual effects.
Yeah.
But it really depends on the director and how they choose to go about those kind of things. So some directors really like using as many practical effects as they can. So the on this website, the filmmakers blog, they have a thing talking about squibs, and they talk about the differences between explosive squibs versus the air squibs. So I'm just going to read this paragraph or this little chunk. Typical squib consists of 3 parts: fake blood pack, charge, and a protective metal plate. Once detonated, the charge will rip through the clothing of the actor and send blood flying everywhere. The downside to this type of squib is that filmmakers would possibly, depending on the country or state, need a pyrotechnics license or a special effects license. To get around the need for certification, air squibs were invented. The air squib involves a fake blood packet and an air-powered charge, so now there's no need for the protective metal plate. Both methods look great and are convincing on screen, but the 2 methods have their pros and cons. The advantages of traditional squibs, the ones that are actual explosive material, have over air-powered squibs are the impact, the portability, and debris. Since the squib is using an actual charge, the actor feels an impact when the charge is detonated, and it provides a more realistic reaction for the character when they get hit by the quote unquote gunshot, because it actually is something feeling like it's hitting your chest. So it's an explosion off your chest. You're going to react to it a little more realistically than you would just by pretending that you're getting hit by a bullet. Secondly, since the charge is small and compact, the character is more portable and is physically capable to move before the impact of the shot. Because of the air squibs and like you have to have all that tubing around them and you have to have something that blasts the air through, that's not as maneuverable. You can't really move around with it as much in shot because it's going to start being very clear that they're wearing something like that. Or it might get in shot that there's a garden hose or whatever you're using to send that pressured air through if they see the behind the character while they're moving. So using the explosive ones make it a bit easier when you're actually on set, if you want them in shot, moving around before they get shot by the gun. This is even more true with remotely detonated squibs, allowing the character to run across a room before being shot. The final advantage of a traditional squib is debris. The charge from the squib is strong enough to not only burst the fake blood packet, but rip through the character's clothing, providing a more violent effect. Where air-powered squibs have an edge is safety and cost. Using compressed air instead of a small charge means there's no need for a metal protective plate, and that there is almost no chance of injury during detonation. Cost is a huge factor that plays a role in any independent or student film. You can create your own air-powered squib with less than $100. Unlike traditional squibs, the device is also reusable as long as you have compressed air. I would also say it saves a lot of money because you don't need a pyrotechnics license or somebody that has that on set. So, I mean, obviously you save money not needing that safety requirement. Or that specialized person with the license, or getting it yourself, which could take a lot of time and money and whatever else to actually learn how to get it and study for it and all that. There are professional air-powered squibs which have like little devices that do it a bit differently than the do it yourself version, and you can find those on different websites, or if you look it up on Google, you can find them. But they tend to be a little bit more expensive. But they do have a bit more of a realistic look, I would say. They just do it. It's specifically for that. So it's a little bit better than just using a garden hose or something like that. But if you don't have too much money, using that garden hose and all those materials, the guy was saying on the video when he was making it, he said he spent maybe like $50. It's really stuff that's not really that cheap, that expensive. So just go to a local hardware store and get it. And you can make it yourself. You just have to like look up the video again to see how. But yeah. Do we have any comments, anything to add about squibs before we move on to fake blood?
You cut off.
Where did I cut off?
Yeah, you cut off. I was like, then we have for
What? Where did I cut off?
Both.
then we have something you cut off, and then before.
Oh,
And it's
well,
cutting off. I can hear you talking over there, and
So wait, where did I cut off?
yeah, honey, I can. Yes, you're cutting off. I can hear you speak in the room.
No, I'm cutting off right now.
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't hear. I can hear things now. Talk.
Can you hear me on the? Can everybody hear me?
I only heard. Can you hear?
Oh man.
Yeah, I don't know why it's being stupid today. Is mine cutting off?
no, I can hear you.
Huh. Honey, maybe I'll disconnect out of the group and connect back then. Maybe that'll help the internet. Okay?
Can everyone hear me now or no? Am I still cutting out?
What?
Am I still cutting out or not?
Yeah, you're cutting out.
All right, I'll get out then. I don't know.
I'll get out.
You're gonna get out. Why?
Because maybe the internet will get back to you.
All right. Can everyone hear me now or no? Is it still messing up?
No, it's still breaking up.
Man, I don't know what's going on. This sucks. Well, I don't know what to do.
Talk.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Should I just bring my phone over there and you can talk through it?
Yeah, for now.
Okay. Mute yourself. All right. Here you go. Talk through the mic.
Oh, how am I gonna?
Oh, that's annoying. Mute me.
There we go. Okay. Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So where did I cut off?
This is so weird.
Right. We're on the same internet. I don't know what's going on. But can
Maybe
you guys?
with the battery, I think.
Where did I cut off at? Hello.
I think you were about to end off the topic, and then I was gonna bring up you talked about squibs and stuff like that, but did you go over blank ammunition, the other side of the squib, the actual
No, I
gunfire?
didn't. That's a good thing to bring up, actually. Go ahead.
But yeah, so you have blank guns, you have prop guns, and then you have actual guns. And then of course, just like with the squibs, like if you're using guns, you're gonna have to have a professional on set to go over everything to make sure you don't have a Alec Baldwin incident, which as you can see, like, it's kind of you had the Alec Baldwin incident, you had
Alec Baldwin, yes.
Bruce Lee, and you had I think his son went out in the same fashion. But yeah. But the whole principle of it is you're shooting blank ammunition. It's just literally a cartridge with gunpowder, and you're using real guns or guns replicas that are able to fire blank ammunition. And then
I would say you can't afford, if you're like a low budget and you can't afford a gun specialist on set, just to take the basic precautions. Always check it every time you're handing it to someone new. Always make sure that it's empty. Always do a check and like yell it loud. Like,
Do you have to have a person on set with a license of some sort for using blanks?
I feel like you should.
Yes,
Yeah,
you do.
awesome. Yeah.
Yes, you do.
That's-
Yeah, I think.
But for me, like I've been on set with live guns before. But we didn't use any ammunition, but we still went through and took the firing pins out, and we made sure everybody was there to witness that there was no ammunition on set and stuff like
Even
that.
if
Just in
it's
case
big
any.
rounds, right? Because like those things can still really hurt.
Oh, blank rounds, yeah, they can burn your face
Yeah.
off. They're still dangerous. But like for me, like I don't understand like the whole Alec Baldwin incident. Like they had live rounds on set too. So the purpose I would assume for using live rounds is so you guys were talking about squibs, which they place them on the body. They put a what do you call it, the pack of blood in there to make it look like somebody got shot. But they also use it for detonating and blowing up like debris and other things like that. So I guess like the whole purpose with the live rounds is to kind of like knock two birds out with one stone. Instead of having to use a squib, you can just use live rounds. I'm supposing that's the only thing I can think of.
Sound is more realistic. I don't know. But that completely separate incident. I feel like a lot of mistakes were made, but with checking the equipment and people playing with stuff that they shouldn't have been. So that's also a completely other case. But yeah, if you are working on a set, I feel like regardless, even if you have a specialist, always check your props. Always make sure that people know that you're about to use them, that they are checked before you use them, and make sure that everything's secured correctly, because like the safety could be broken, and then it could shoot automatically if you accidentally press it or something like that. Like accidents happen. So any precaution you take is like all your precautions you take would be, there's never like, oh, you don't need this. No, always take as many
Definitely.
precautions.
Even if you're not using real guns, or if you're not using like gun replicas, if you're using, let's say you're doing airsoft is very, very good. If you know how to work it right.
They hurt a lot. They bruise.
Yeah, if you're not having somebody that can do the blank rounds, I've heard there's airsoft guns that have, is it gas powered ones that have like an actual blowback?
Yeah.
There's a
That gives you more
blowback, and there's a little bit of a
movement.
smoke that comes out of the chamber, a little bit of that. So those are pretty good too. Like if you can't afford real, because guns are actually expensive, but if you can't afford real guns and you don't want to go through the training to learn and get all the licenses and stuff like that, airsoft is another way to go, and I suggest that. But even with airsoft guns,
Everything is
even an object that looks like a gun, like it's still like you still want to take. Like I tell people, like even if the guns are plastic, I say, hey man, like after each take, put the gun down. Like don't keep it in your hand, put it down, because like even if you're not, you never know who's watching. I saw like when I was in film school, one of my classmates was showing us this footage, and they were doing a little shootout like in their front yard. But one of the neighbors saw it, called the cops, and the cops come,
Oh my
but they
goodness.
come thinking there's guns, you know what I mean? So they
Yeah.
come out, guns drawn,
Right.
everybody on the ground, like serious, and it was crazy because like it was like the big open wide shot. You hear him call action, and then as soon as he calls action, you can hear the police sirens in the background, and they're getting closer and closer and closer. But you don't think they're coming to like his location. And then you see like one of the actors like hiding behind a tree, and then you see the cop car down the street at the stop sign, turn, flies all the way down. Cops get out the car and like, get over. And this is all on camera, like on one take. And they had to explain. And yeah, just lucky that it didn't get shot like on a take, just because they didn't. And there's really, even if you go through, like if you go door to door and you tell your neighbors like, hey, like we're doing you're still gonna get like the best way to avoid that is to call your local police department. Still go door to door, let your neighbors know, but then call the police department and say, hey, we're shooting a movie. If you have permits, I'm pretty sure that's gonna help you out. But let's say we're shooting a movie. Well, you're definitely gonna need permits depending on where you shoot, especially in DC. They're gonna ask for that. But in order to avoid it, like you're
Sometimes they require you to have a cop on set.
No, yeah, I was about to say that. I was gonna say that sometimes when you let them know, they'll be like, okay, so is it all right? So we're gonna send a cop just to make sure
Pay their hours,
everything's okay, and that kind of thing. But that's why they always say treat everything like a stunt. Even walking is considered a stunt.
No, running.
Running is considered a stunt. Sometimes, depending on the walking. But that's why they say consider everything that's a faster paced movement or dealing with other objects to be a stunt, and take as many precautions, because it's always better to be overly cautious than under, and then accidents happen, especially if it's an indie shoot. You can't really afford as many. You always should, have a medical kit and be near a hospital and have all that information on your on the papers you give out and that kind of thing.
I think if you have like certain elements, certain things, like if you have to have a pyrotechnics licensed person and things like that, I think you do have to also have a medical nurse or certified or something like that on set.
No, yeah, definitely. I was gonna
Especially
say,
depending on the location. So it just depends. And if you're doing anything with the union, then you definitely need that.
no, especially, yeah, they will ask for a lot. I know that a lot of union sets will have a nurse on hand. Even if they have like information to a hospital and a first aid kit, they will have a medical professional there in case of emergencies to check out your arm. Like we all know the whole Friends incident where like the only stunt he was doing was jumping on a chair, and he dislocated his arm, and they had to call the fire department.
Yeah.
So any little thing can become a stunt and become a risk.
So what I heard about Alec Baldwin's case was that this was happening at a very remote location. And second thing was that they had put somebody on the supervisory role for the firearms. And that person, they gave just a kind of a cheat sheet to go through the stuff. And I believe she was texting her friends saying that I have no idea what I'm doing. I hope everything goes well,
Oh,
Yeah,
So
we try not to mention it too much because we know it's like controversial or whatever, but if there's anything we can admit, it's that as it was his production company, so at the end of the day there were production issues and flaws that need to be taken accountability. It doesn't matter if it was like, oh, this person, and at the end of the day it is the production company that is the main responsible. So that makes it even harder for and even more of a responsibility for people in the indie scene that have their own little production company, especially. Like,
no, just clarification. That's what I read in the reports that came in the newspaper. So not from my own knowledge, but I'm just basically repeating what I read on the media.
Right.
We just don't want any it to become a huge debate when we're talking. It's like, oh my, but yeah, definitely. Like, you need to make sure you have people that are qualified and not just like, oh yeah, you stitched up somebody once, right? You can do. Like, no, God, no. Just I know that as indie filmmakers, we're very used to trying to cut corners or trying to figure out ways that we can go around certain issues or even try to do it right, but with little resources that we have. But there are some things that we can't afford to cut corners on, and we have to do an extra precaution.
And this one was like a full-fledged production company, right? I mean, it's not even
it was like a large budget film with well-known people.
I mean, it was considered indie, I suppose, because it was his production company. I don't know. It was like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
All right. Well, so moving on from that. So yeah, there's definitely the other side to it. Like Brian was talking about, the blanks where you'll have the gun and it's firing blanks. And if you can afford that, you also have to have somebody who knows what they're doing on set, licensed professional doing, giving the instruction of how to use it and all of that to make sure everything's safe. But that gives you that realistic blowback and realistic where it looks like they're shooting at the person and everything like that. So those are the two sides of that effect. And like he said, no, not BB, airsoft guns with, I think, gas-powered airsoft guns, they give a blowback themselves and you don't actually have to fire anything out of it. So it can give a little bit of that movement. If you don't want to have a special, a licensed professional on set, you can use something like that. Just make sure it's not loaded. Because even shooting at somebody with an airsoft, you could still hit their eye. So you just want to be sure that it's not loaded and check it and be sure you're good to go.
This seems obvious, but I would also recommend like practicing before you actually shoot the scene, like doing a few practice shoots, either with a dummy so that you're not risking the person, or with the person, but like protective gear or something like that, just to make sure you know the target, you got it right, so that there's no accidents.
You should always test it anyway, just to see if it works.
Always test, because you never know. I remember my first gun scene. The actor had never had any experience with guns at all. So like I had to like teach him like right there. So that, and like the differences between the airsoft, the blanks, and then just a fake gun is that the kickback, like if you've never shot a gun before, like if you watch I watch some movies and I'm like, yo, this is so terrible. Like, nobody can hold a gun that steady while fired. No, I don't care who you are. Like a gun is gonna kick back. You're not gonna hold it and smooth trigger it. Like I see a lot of movies and I'm like, yo, this is so they didn't even try. But the actor doesn't know. If the actor hasn't had any experience shooting guns before, he's just gonna,
like crooked and they're
point,
shooting and it
point
aims
and shoot. Yeah. So that's the benefit of the blanks, is that you're gonna get that kickback regardless. You're going to. The airsoft a little bit, and then the toy guns, no, you're not gonna get any kick. So you have to really rely on the actor to sell it.
Right. Even then, I would say, like, just like with the bullet squibs, having that actual kickback, having that actual explosion where it feels like a bullet hit, it's going to just have a more realistic final output. Because if you're trying to act like something's there that it's not, even if you know what it does, it's still hard to get those movements right as much as like the actual thing.
Yeah. Then you also want to time it out as well, because like if you have your guy getting shot, gets hit 3 times, but then the actor pulls the trigger 5 times, it's gonna, okay, well then now something in the background has to get hit, or where do these extra bullets go?
Right.
So you got to time that out. Sometimes it might be a little excessive, like I said with the vest, like the 80s and 90s, they would just go overboard and they would strap a guy with a vest and all the squibs would go off. And the thing is that the squibs would go off and the vest would reposition itself. So sometimes like the bullet holes on the shirt would like, it just wouldn't make any sense. I'd be like, yo, how did he get shot from that angle? You know what I'm saying? Like the squibs just get all over the place. So, I mean, they've gotten a lot better with it nowadays. Like you're not going to be able to tell the difference or, between special effects and practical effects. But back then, yeah, like a Beverly Hills Cop, even like the higher budget ones, like Beverly Hills Cop, it was like, those were like, oh my God. Yeah. But
yeah, special effects have definitely come a long way, even the practical ones.
That and the squib kind of, like you were saying, the squib kind of guides the actor in a way. Like if he's getting hit this way with the squib, he's going to push his body that way. But I've also seen like people get shot and go in the opposite direction, and there's you just got shot, dude. Like, no way you're going to fall that way. But yeah. So yeah, there's a reason why you go through the trials and tribulation with live but blanks and squibs and stuff, is just to get a not only a better feel but a more realistic look.
Mm-hmm. And to really sell that they're actually doing those things.
Yeah.
You want to try out the sound and see if it's working again? Because I gotta finish food.
All right, hold on.
Yeah, I'll mute myself.
Can you hear me now? Well, you gotta get out of here.
Sorry.
All right, am I good? Everybody hear me or no?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
V asked, would anyone recommend these types of scenes saved for the close to last or last day of filming? I think it really depends on the actor's availability and the scheduling with that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think it could work that way if you can work it out. It also depends on the location. How long do you have that location for, and what other scenes are you doing with that?
And sometimes the director will prefer the harder scenes
of the scene
first,
is it
right?
3 days before when the character cut their hair, or 3 days after they cut their hair, because now they need to have that short hair for it. So there's a lot of different elements that would go into timing it out like that. But to me, I would say, yeah, if you can make those kinds of harder shots, especially if anybody accidentally gets hurt, hopefully they don't, but just in case, having them on that last day might be a little better than having it somewhere in the middle where it could potentially be a problem. All right, moving on from that, we're going to talk about fake blood. Like I said, there's a lot of different mixes for fake blood. This comes from Insider, their video. I think it was letter D in the syllabus, how fake blood is made for movies. Some of these things are coming from this. Obviously, there's the corn syrup. Hold on, let me go to some of these. Open these up. Corn syrup is used to make it have more of a thicker consistency. Oh, hold on. Chisom said, how long does it take to get a pyro license, or is it easier to just hire one yourself? I'm not sure how long it would take to get one, but I'm assuming it's not easy.
Let me see if I can find it.
A lot of different things about explosives, fire, and other things like that to be able to have that license. You need to actually know what you're doing. So there's a lot of safety that goes into it and a lot of expertise. So I would say it's probably easier just to hire somebody, but I'm not sure how long it actually takes. or if you have to take a specialized course, like you do if you're trying to become a nurse or something like that. Does anybody know?
I'm looking it up.
I think you have to be, you should have experience handling the firearms, because I had once a guy who did some pyrotechnic on the set that I was on, and this guy was a guy who had been in a combat situation before, and then he kind of got this license. So I think it kind of if you're just going to go and get it yourself, that's going to probably.
So it says it takes on average 45 days to 23 to 45 days. How long does it take to receive a pyrotechnician certification? Well, most likely it will be quicker. Allow 45 days to receive a certification. Oh, wait, that's a certification. Dude, I'm talking about the course. Let me see. For each which calculate.
Well, when you find it, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and move on to blood while we're talking about.
Go ahead.
All right. And when you find it, just stop me and let me know. All right. So with fake blood, a lot of the recipes, if you're going to make it at home yourself, a lot of them will start with corn syrup. That way it has a little bit more of a thicker consistency than you'd get from something that's not as thick, something like water or milk or whatever else. It'll be a lot more liquidy, it'll swish around too much and not look real. Blood is a bit thicker. It's not exactly the same consistency as water, or it's not as thin. So it does have some thickness to it. So that's why we start out with corn syrup. Also, corn syrup is edible. So that's always good if you need to have it in their mouth. Starting with something that is edible and not toxic is always a good place to start. Red dye. A lot of red dye is used, of course, to make it red, but then they use on the larger sets, they usually use some blue and a little bit of black, just a tiny bit, maybe a few drops, just to get it a lot darker. Because if it's just red dye, they say it looks kind of like you're doing cherry jello or something. So it sticks out as being fake. So you want to make it a little bit darker, because blood isn't just red. There's some blue and some darker color into it, especially depending on where the blood is coming from, because straight from the artery, straight from where from your wrist, from your neck, getting cut in the gut, those are all going to be a little bit different looking. They'll all be pretty similar, but they do tend to have different amount of red or like darker color, look almost black in some areas, depending on where it's coming from or how long it's been out. If you're trying to do dried blood, of course it's going to be a lot darker, so you want to make sure that you have darker looking blood, because when it dries up it tends to coagulate and get a little bit darker and thicker. So they all start with that, then they do the red dye, blue dye. Then they use something called an opacifier, which just makes it more opaque. And that is because if you just use the corn syrup and you add red dye to it, it's going to be a little translucent. And blood itself is not very translucent. So you want to make sure to add something. I'm not exactly sure what this opacifier is, but it's just something to make it not be translucent, not be see-through. So you want to make it sure that whatever you're doing, it's gonna be opaque.
You ready?
Yep.
So there's this thing, there's this website I found talking about, so you want to be a pyrotechnician. Apparently you have to contact, one second. Here it is. You have to contact the state fire marshal and get an application for the type of license you want. You can get a federal license or a state license, and you can't have a criminal, you can't be a convicted felon, like criminal charges, that kind of thing. And apparently, according to this, you have to be a trainee, license 3. You'll have to work with other licensed operators for a minimum of 2 years for experience. And then after that, you go through the process again and upgrade to a class 2 license. And then after a little more work, you get a class 1 license. It also says that you're only allowed to make one mistake with pyrotechnics, or you lose your license, pretty much.
That makes
I'm
sense.
going to, yeah, I'm going to share, this one's pretty short, and it just answers a few questions. I'll see if I can find a more in-depth article, but I'll share this one on the group, and I'll send it to Coda for him to send through email for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, so it's not a short thing. It sounds like it's basically like a course you would take just to get, any kind of specialization course. It's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
I know I did
Sounds like an
see one of the
associate's degree
websites
type
in the
of thing, and then-
syllabus. One of the websites in the syllabus did talk about which license is needed when, and I'm not exactly sure what it was, but basically the more dangerous the thing is, the higher the license you need, the more experienced professional you need to be on set. So at license, what is it, tier 1 or level 1 or whatever?
Yeah,
call it?
they said there's like a I think it is tier. Let me go back. Dang it. I just was looking for
I think it's
another
tier
one.
1 license.
Yeah, it's tier 1, tier 2,
most.
and then tier 3. I believe there's 3 tiers. The third tier is your trainee, if I'm not mistaken, according to this.
Right. And well, you're like, basically you have an associate's degree in pyrotechnics, and then tier 2, you got your bachelor's, and tier 3, you got your master's, kind of thing.
There's not necessarily, because according to this, with tier 3, you can only work with another licensed professional. So it's more like you're a trainee
I
than
mean, your associate's degree is not going to get you very far. So same thing.
yeah. Okay. There's also something as like to get a professional fireworks license. That's another thing. Like, I don't know if you need pyrotechnic experience in that, but I'll send you the article of that as well, in case anyone wants to get a fireworks license for a shoot.
Yeah,
So I'll send
basically
you
it's
that
just
as
going to
well.
be easier to hire somebody who already has the license and can do it for you, since those things are going to take years to acquire.
Yeah, it does seem like they do take
different-
work, because as they should, because it is a specialization. It is, a field, and it
And it's a
is
different skill
complex.
set and expertise needed
Yeah.
to be able to do it. So you can't just go out and get one and, do a 20-day course and then have it. You have to really take the time and learn the things to be able to get it.
I would think they would have different licenses for like firearms usage and explosives. They would probably come into 2 different categories, I think.
But yeah, very well, maybe.
And there's also, it says here, like different, you can get multiple degrees to work in pyrotechnic as well. So like there's different degrees you can get, and get those licenses within those degrees.
All right, so moving back on to fake blood again. So fake blood, again, it starts with corn syrup. Most of them start with corn syrup, red food dye with a little tiny bit of either blue or black food dye mixed in. Then you got the opacifier to make sure it's not translucent, it's not see-through, so that when you do have that red dye, that blue dye, it's going to look opaque. And then actually they were saying that sometimes they'll add soap to it too, just so it can wash out easier. So actually adding soap to the blood itself, if you're making it at home, some liquid soap, just a little bit, it can help to wash it out later so it doesn't stain, and it's easier to get out of different things, or easier to get off the floor if some spills or whatever happens. So that's also something to keep in mind. You can put soap in it, but if you put soap in it, you make sure that it doesn't go in somebody's mouth at that point. All the rest of this stuff, I'm not sure if this opacifier that they used would be edible, but if you use something more like milk or something that's a little bit more opaque, you could still use it in someone's mouth and get it more of a darker color.
Obviously, you also have to consider the fact that they are, what's the term I'm looking for? They age and they become gross, and they are perishable. So you also can't leave them in the sun for too long, because if you're using milk, for example, it might curdle. So that's also something to keep in mind, depending on what ingredients you're using, where to store them, and the shelf life that they might have.
Yeah. And
Is
the
it,
way that they react to like clothing and things might change depending on what you're putting in them too. So usually what people will do is they'll start making the fake blood before they start shooting like a lot before in the pre-production phase. They'll have the people working on the blood, depending on when they need it and how. And they will just do test after test, seeing what recipe works best for their specific situation.
Is there any mention of wearing like a bulletproof vest inside your clothing?
For the gun, for the fake gun shots, or what?
Yeah, even for the fake gun, when you're actually having the subject kind of wear that underneath, and then you have whatever mechanism you have for the explosive.
From what we
I
saw,
haven't
there's
seen
some
it.
videos.
I saw like just the little metal plate for that, but not really like a whole vest. But it really, I guess it just depends on how dangerous the situation is and how easily it's going to be. I mean, it also depends, like Brian was talking about, if you were going to notice that the person's wearing it, they would probably try their best to make sure that it's not needed as much as they can until it's, until the very moment that it is needed. So they might use one, but it would make somebody look thicker, even if you put something over their clothing. So it might be obvious. And they, usually when you're doing films, you want to make sure to hide these things. And so I guess it really depends on like that kind of stuff. But I haven't seen anything. I've seen that they use some kind of vest and things, but bulletproof vests are very specific and very thick, so that, because they're actually stopping bullets, and bullets, coming at a very high velocity and everything will have a huge impact. So you got to make sure that thing's thick and sturdy, and it just bogs down maneuverability, and it just looks very thick. So I'm not sure how often it's used on sets like that.
So I think like one or two of the videos actually show, what they did show was people putting like an something to wear underneath, like an outfit, and then ways to hide the tube, or ways to hide the mechanism underneath your clothes, and certain clothes you could wear that.
Well, that was for the air-powered squibs, not for the explosive.
Yeah, but I remember he also said that you can use these with the actual explosives. Like some of these rules do apply because they're also going to be a little bulkier, and you're going to need to hide
them. Yeah, but not the clothing's not going to stop an explosive, so it's not really like that. If you're shooting a bullet at somebody, if you're shooting a fake bullet or a one like that, it's not going to matter if they have another shirt on underneath.
I feel like, I feel like that would be
for the
going
safety
into
aspect. It just
specific.
depends on how dangerous it is. Again, like how dangerous it would be, and how noticeable it will be for them to be wearing something like that. I do know that they wear some kind of vest sometimes, but I don't think it's bulletproof. I think it's just like a protective layer that's a little bit thinner and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm nowhere near an expert on those things, so I have no idea. Maybe they,
yeah, we're just scratching the surface on like the basics, but I'm sure like with the playlists on YouTube, some people might go into it a little more in detail if we have one on special effects or like practical effects and stuff like that might be there. Or I'm sure there's like film websites that'll delve deeper into that.
All right, but once you have all
it's
of
a
your
lot.
blood
That's the problem.
components, once you have your recipe ready, you stir it all together, you make it look like blood. It's going to look different depending on how much you have in one spot. Like you can see in this bowl, it's red on the outsides when it touches something, but on the inside it looks kind of brown or blackish. So again, it's just going to depend on your personal preference of how red or how dark you want it to look, and how much you're going to be using, and then just testing it out on clothing and backgrounds on the wall, things like that, to see how it sticks, if it stains, those kinds of things you want to make sure to do before you give it to somebody. And if it has to be used in somebody's mouth, then you want to make sure you're not using anything that is toxic, any kind of soap, anything that isn't used or isn't edible. I would say stay away from. There's other ways to make it darker. Some people use cocoa powder, things like that. If you want to make the blood thinner, people add water to it. So if you want it to run down the wall, or you want it to run down somebody's clothes, then you don't want to just use corn syrup. You want to add some water to it to give it a little bit more of a flow. Whenever it's running down, it'll run down a little faster and give you that look. Some people use like gelatin. There's toothpaste I've seen, like in some of these pictures, they show different things. Glue has been used. I've seen cotton is one of these. I think cotton balls is this one right here. So it just depends on how thick you want it to look, how old it's supposed to be, and if it's supposed to go in somebody's mouth or if it's supposed to come off their chest. But if you're doing dried up blood, obviously you're going to try to use something a little bit different to make it look more like it's coagulating than you would like some runny, fresh blood that's just now coming out of someone's artery when they get shot or hurt or cut. Man, this is blurry. Let me see if I can. Well, let me see if I can look it up separately. So some of the fake blood recipes that you can find online is like the corn syrup one that's non-toxic. You can combine water, add red dye until it gets the desired shade, a few drops of blue. They say or green. You can do blue, green, or black to make it darker or more realistic color. Thickening agents, they say you can use sifted flour, cornstarch, chocolate syrup, like Brian said earlier, until you get the right consistency. Then you let that mixture sit at room temperature for about 10 minutes so you can use it. There's also cocoa powder I've seen people use in blood, cocoa powder with flour. Those are the non-toxic ones. Again, if you're trying to use it for somebody's mouth, you're going to be using food ingredients, try to get the color and consistency you want. That recipe online for this one anyway, from this person, is a combined corn syrup with red food dye until it reaches the desired shade. Again, add a few drops of blue or green coloring, a small amount of cocoa powder, and finalize it by thickening it with pinches of flour or cornstarch. If you want to make it more thin, then just add a little bit of water until you reach your desired consistency. Movie set blood, where you don't use it near your ears, mouth, nose. 3 parts soluble hair gel and 1 part water soluble personal lubricant in a bowl. Add drops of red dye food coloring and blue and green until reaching the desired shade. Then add a little bit of chocolate syrup for desired consistency, and you're all done. And they claim it's great for realistic blood splatters. Everybody does it differently. From every single thing I've seen, everybody does it a bit differently. Most of them, again, they all mostly start with corn syrup, but not all the time. It just depends on what they're using it for and how thick they want it and things like that. So there's a bunch of different things you can do and add and mix around to make it look the way you want, especially for coloring and especially for like how thick it is. So there's those options, but you can probably find others to make it thinner or thicker or a different color as well. Like they said, grape juice, or not grape juice. What did they say? Ryan, what was it? Cranberry juice. But yeah, there's many different recipes out there, so you can always look it up. You can always try your own, and then you can always adjust them as necessary. But I would always say, just check it out. Check how it reacts to clothes, to the wall, or whatever you're using it for. Just test it out. See how it splatters. See how it comes out. If you're going to make it look like a bullet shot on the person, you're going to use it as an air-powered squib. Just make sure it looks dark enough for your use case. And you also want to make sure that you put it under the lighting conditions you're going to have on set. So if you're going to use, a tungsten light, you want to make sure that the blood looks the right color for that light, because it's going to be coming off a different color than you would by using it under a daytime looking light. So those will have different color temperatures. So you want to make sure that the blood looks good under that color temperature. It might look good in your kitchen. It might look good wherever you're making it. But then when you get it on set under those different lights, it might look bad or not how you pictured it. So try to get it as close to that as possible before you try to just bring it on set for your shot. A lot of trial and error goes into it. And I would say the same thing as if you were going to cook something. You just want to add a little bit of ingredients at a time. Don't overdo it, because if you overdo it too much, if you add too much red, then you're going to have to go back and start over and waste a lot of things. So instead, just do it little by little until you reach your desired look, where you can keep testing it out and seeing what you do. And lastly, I would say, if you have a specific look that you're going for and you're going to do multiple projects with it, and you're going to make sure that it's, if you're trying to make a series or a TV show or something like that, especially, I would try to keep a recipe of whatever you're doing with your blood, so that the blood stays pretty similar throughout and it doesn't change drastically, or it's hard to find that coloring. Even if you want to change the color later, it's better to have a starting recipe than to just start from scratch all over again. There's also something called dark corn syrup that you can use to make the blood look darker from the start. So if you're trying to make really dark black or really dark blue looking blood, then using dark corn syrup can be better than just starting with the basic corn syrup that's that white color, or that translucent color. And then there's also pre-made blood that you can buy online. There's certain companies that do it. Some of these you'll have to look up and research to see if they are good, what their consistency is. This is the thick blood. I know Ben Nye is a company that does a lot of, it does it for theatrical. Theaters use it a lot for their productions and things like that. And they have different variations. They have like the thick one, the thin one, the one in the middle. But they're not the only brand out there. There's a bunch of other brands that have it. Some of these are going to stain clothes and stain walls and surfaces. So you want to be aware if it does that or not. And some of these, again, they're going to be either toxic. Most of them actually, I think, are toxic when you buy them online. I don't really know too many food-based ones, but there's probably some out there. I just don't know about them. Either way, check it out before you get them and make sure you can use it in your situation that you're going for before you just go ahead and buy it because it says fake blood. And also do your research, checking the reviews on it, making sure that it's doing, it might look good in the picture, but you get it and it looks completely different. So there's probably YouTube videos out there showing that exact brand and showing how it splatters, how it spreads, how it gushes out. So you always want to do your research and check out those things before you get it, making sure that you know what you're getting into, unless you're just trying to buy a bunch of stuff and test around. But yeah. There's also these fake blood rubber things that you can have, and that's good for if you can't get any blood anywhere on a location or on a set. You can buy these fake rubber things and put them everywhere. They come in different shapes and sizes, so you can put a bunch next to each other to make it look like the blood splattered everywhere, or you can leave a little slab down on the ground and make it look like it's make it look like it's a puddle of blood. It won't look as realistic, of course, because it's not actually liquid, but under the right circumstances, or if it's just you can't get blood anywhere, you can't ruin that location because you're in a very specific place and they're very strict, and you want to make sure that you don't have to pay anything or get kicked out. Using these is always an option, just to make sure that you have something. And yeah, no, that's it. So does anybody have anything to add to fake blood, or any questions or comments?
Yeah. So blood is going to get everywhere. If you're going to use it, it's going to end up in places like there's no explanation as to how it got on the ceiling or how it got anywhere. If you just use it, it's going to end up anywhere. It's not going to. Just know that if your intent is, I need, it's going to get everywhere. I don't know how, it just does. I did a scene where I was like, oh, it's just gonna be one spritz, and then next thing I know, the whole wall is like covered in like fake blood. So just know that. Bring wipes and whatever you need to bring. Be prepared to clean up a lot because it gets everywhere.
Gotcha. All right, moving on from that, we're going to be talking about fog, haze, or fog or smoke. Those are the same thing, or haze machines. So fog is the thicker one. It looks more like a cloud in the air. Haze looks more like a smoky room and makes everything a little more soft appearing. It goes all over the place, covering the entire room. And it allows those light beams to be used through it like that. You can see not like that. Like, I don't know if I can get to it. Kind of like that, where you see those like light beams shooting through, especially the one on the right. You can see the light coming from the door shooting through the room. And the way they did that is they just shoot some haze into the air so that there's something the light to hit as it travels through the air. So if you're going for that effect, if you're going for that look, then you definitely want to get a haze machine. Haze machines tend to be a bit more pricey than the smoke machines or the fog machines. And again, fog machines will leave like a thicker cloud. That's something that hangs in the air. So if you wanted to make it look like, if you want to make it really condensed and in a certain area, make it look like there's a fire, you would use a fog machine. And if you're trying to make it look more or something like that, if you want the effect to be in the middle and somebody come out of it, if it's some steam or if it's some, not really steam, but if it's like a fire and there's smoke coming off of it, or if it's just a certain effect you're going for, that will make it stay in the same area and not really spread out as far as haze would. Again, haze will go in the entire room. It'll stay in the air for a lot longer than fog. Fog will go up in the air and it'll start to dissipate, and you can't really hold it as much as you can with haze. Haze, you might be able to use it for a few shots, depending on which one you have, before having to like rehaze everything. But it is easier to keep consistency with haze than it is with fog. There are water-based and oil-based solutions to create haze and fog. The water-based ones are, they're obviously, you can breathe them in easier. They're not as bad on the lungs and stuff like that. The oil-based ones, that you can still breathe them in, I'm pretty sure, but they're not, they just have some advantages over the other. The oil-based ones tend to hold longer and are cheaper to do with large amounts of large installations, because you don't have to keep refilling the machine a bunch to get it to keep giving you out haze or fog. What? Oh, am I cutting out again?
Crap, you're cutting out again.
Cutting out right now?
I can't hear you, honey. You're cutting out again.
Man, what is going on?
I'll bring the phone.
All right, well, I'm gonna mute myself then.
Here, just use my phone.
Yep, I'm the whole time.
Mm.
All right, so can everybody hear me?
I'm gonna leave the door open so I can try to.
Can you guys hear me now? Okay, cool. All right, so with haze, you have that, or with haze or fog, you have those water-based or oil-based solutions. The oil will hold longer, and it tends to be cheaper with large installations because they can use less of it. With the water one, it diffuses a bit faster, and so then you have to keep refilling it and rehazing more often than you would with the oil-based one. But the oil-based one will also have the downside of using it is if you're constantly using it and it's for long periods of time, the equipment or the surfaces around the area will start to get like an oily residue. So it'll have like you'll feel it. It's like when you cook bacon and you feel it on your skin, or you feel it around the surfaces when there's like that grease going in the air. So if you're using an oil-based one, it does tend to, be cheaper because you're not using as much of it. But if you're using it for prolonged periods of time and you keep reusing it, it's going to get on those surfaces. It's going to get on your equipment. You're going to have to wipe everything down, and it's a little bit more of an issue when it comes to like ventilation and things like that you don't want to clog up. You don't want to get it. You don't want to have anything ruin those things on location. So the oil ones, they have their pros and cons. So it just depends on what you're trying to use it for and how long you're trying to use it. So let me see if I have. Then you got fog that is specifically for staying low to the ground. Certain machines will do this. You can also do this yourself with a regular fog machine. You just have to add dry ice or something to cool it down in front of it so that when it comes out, it sticks to the ground and stays low. Whenever the fog is cooled, it'll stay low, hugging the ground, like in the picture. And there are certain machines that do this itself. They just have a little attachment on the front where you put it on and it'll cool it down before releasing it out into the air or the ground in this case. So if you're looking for something like that, like a mysterious graveyard or something like that, and you want to have some fog or you want to make it a little more mysterious or otherworldly, using a dry ice machine or using a low hanging fog machine will give you the same result. When using fog rises slowly and it falls slowly. It stays in one area while the haze goes everywhere and encompasses the entire room. Fog is thick, haze is thin. Fog and smoke machines typically mean the same thing. So if you ever hear smoke machine, it's not going to be actual smoke because that is dangerous if you're using it, especially inside. So smoke machine will be the same thing as a fog machine if you're buying it online. Some people actually do use smoke because it does have a different look, but they don't use it indoors typically. They use it outdoors where it's not actually near the set, not actually near the crew or the actors. And they'll use it for certain scenes or certain looks because smoke can tend to be darker and look more realistic. If there's a giant fire or something like that, they might use actual smoke to help sell the effect when they add extra visual effects later. But if you're looking at a smoke machine, it's a fog machine. They mean the same thing. There's also different solutions whenever you're using like fog machines, or I don't think I have a picture of it, but there's different solutions of like how thick they're going to be. So if you're buying the solution for it, the stuff you're going to pour into your machine to create that fog, to create that haze, you might have one that is heavy, or you might have one that's medium, or you might have one that is light, where heavy would be the one that is thicker and doesn't dissipate as quickly, hangs in the air longer, and light means it's going to go away a lot faster and be a lot thinner. They give off different looks, and it just depends on what you're trying to use it for. So again, that's going to be a decision you have to make when you're buying them, and you'll have to look it up or just test it out yourself to see which one you like best and which one you want to use on your specific situation. Like I said, haze machines are typically more expensive than fog machines. So keep that in mind. A haze machine will cost hundreds of dollars more than a fog machine on various levels. There are on both ends, you have, the lower end, the cheaper ones, which could be $50, $100 for a fog machine and $300 for a haze machine or something like that. But then on the higher end, the highest end, you can get into the thousands, but somewhere in between, you can get into like several $100s. And just haze machines are more expensive than fog machines for whatever reason. It's something to do with how they're created, how they work. They have more complex parts and they can work for longer. So those are some of the reasons. you always want to make sure that whichever one you have, if you have a Haze machine, make sure you're not using any kind of fog solution for it. And if you have a fog machine, don't use Haze solution with it, because those can damage the machines. They're not made for those mixes. Those mixes are specifically for creating fog or for creating haze. So they're not really as interchangeable as you might think. And you make sure that you don't use it in one of your machines, because you could damage it and make it not work. Just make sure you're buying the right kind of solution for whatever machine that you have. Because whatever you have, it'll be made for that. It'll be made for the thickness and the consistency, and whatever the stuff's made out of, it'll be made specifically for those machines. You want to make sure you use the right one every time, so you're not damaging your machine and having to buy a new one, or worse, interrupting the production day, and then you have to stop all production for the whole day and buy a new machine. Haze machines can be continually run, where fog machines have a warm-up period. So with a fog machine, it has to get ready. The way it works, I believe, is you send the liquid through and it heats it up just a little bit to make it turn into to make it evaporate and become the fog that we see coming out of the machine. So it takes a little bit to warm up that end part to make it come out as fog. Whereas haze, it's a bit different, where you can just send it straight through and it doesn't really have that warm up period. You can just continuously run it as well. Where fog will have a certain amount of time you can run it, and then it'll reset and you have to wait for it to charge up again and be ready once more to use it again. There's also haze in a can that you can use that can work quickly in a pinch. There's certain brands that make it. It doesn't look it's not as consistent of a look, of course, as some of these might be, where you're actually shooting the haze up into the air and you can control how much you're doing. The haze in the can won't hang in the air as long, but it is a solution if you need to just have a quick bit of haze in a pinch. You need it really quickly, and you don't want to or you don't have the money for the machine. One of those cans of haze can work, just to quickly spray it around the room and get that look you're going for. Also, you want to be aware when you're using fog or haze machines that they can set off fire alarms. They don't always do it, but the fire alarm does take it like it is smoke. However, well, let me see.
And it said recording stopped.
Can you see it now? This is weird. I don't know why it's messing up so much.
You're still in. There's still 7 people in the group. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's just not letting me actually share, and it kicked me out. Well, it didn't kick me out, but it stopped the recording, and then
Yeah, sometimes I think the Wi-Fi connection goes out and in. That happened to me a couple of weeks back, and it was horrible. I think they kind of were doing something at the internet provider sent. So could be that your signal is kind of weak a little bit. Have some effect.
True. This is using the wireless connection to the.
Yeah, I would suggest use maybe a wired connection if you can. That would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, we don't. Well, we don't have the wired connection because it's in the other room. But
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, if you directly run it from the router or the modem, the wire, the wired cable, that would that's usually faster than the Wi-Fi sometimes.
Yeah, and it's usually a more stable connection. All right, let me see. Check with that before you start and just see if it's working or not, if it's setting off those alarms. And if it's going, because some of the rooms, some of the places won't have as sensitive of fire alarms, so it will be fine. And some of them have a lot more sensitive ones, so it'll be a lot worse, and it'll be a lot harder to get to use those machines in that place. So you'll have to figure out a way to work around it. One alternative that some people use is an air humidifier, that it can work for short scenes, but really requires you to use it for several hours beforehand for the haze look. Air humidifiers take water and they just make it evaporate into the air in the room. And so all you're doing is you're breathing in like water when you're breathing it in. It's actually good for people, so it is healthier than using a fog machine or a haze machine, because those after long periods can start to be bad for your lungs and everything, because it's just kind of like smoking. Not exactly to that extent, but anything you inhale is bad and worse than just inhaling air or water or something like that. So
I don't really
air
recommend-
humidifier is a bit better, but it takes forever to get ready, and it only works for a short period of time after you're done.
I really don't recommend the air humidifier because it's a humidifier. So it's making water and throwing it into the air. So if you have, so your camera, it gets the air really moist. And if you're in there for a long period of time, like you said, then it could probably damage some of your electrical equipment at some point. Because it's not, a humidifier is not intended to, it's intended to moisten the air, but not to that extent where it's going to be, altering light with the intent of, getting light rays and stuff like that. So I would imagine that's going to take a lot. Like you said, you have to run it a long time, and I'm pretty sure you're going to have it on the highest setting to get it to do that. And just thinking about that, I'm thinking, okay, like, my camera will probably short out, or whatever electrical equipment you got might get moist and just kind of just clunk out just because of that.
Yeah, and I agree. And they said the guy was using it before his scene. He ran it overnight before he's had a scene in the day. So he didn't have his equipment in there yet, but it takes forever to do the same kind of effect because it's not made for that. Like Brian said, it's very hard to get right. So he only recommended it if you need it for a really short scene and you don't want to have to get the equipment for it or whatever. But I agree that you want to use the thing that's made for it if you're trying to get a specific look, that specific effect. Something to look out for when you're buying either a fog machine or a haze machine is just what is their fluid usage. Some will use more than others to get that same amount of that same look. So you want to see like how much they're using. And the ones that are using it more quickly, you'll obviously have to factor in the cost of buying more solution so that you're constantly replacing it, because it's running through that liquid a lot faster than maybe some of the other ones. The more expensive versions of the machines can also often produce a more consistent, continuous look. Whereas on the very cheaper end, you have stuff that it might look one way when you do it for, you shoot it out for 3 minutes and it has a certain consistency, a certain thickness, and it spreads through the room in a certain way. But then if you try to do it again for 3 minutes, it makes a different look. It looks thicker, or it doesn't spread to the same part of the room. So for a more consistent and continuous look, for better edits, the more expensive version will be better because it'll just have that more consistent look to it while you're using it. Some other things to look out for when buying them is some of them are wired. Some of them have, they're all wired. They all plug into the wall, but some of them have wired controls while others have wireless controls. So if you have a wireless control, you might be able to have somebody out of the picture setting it off, while if you have it wired, you can have it, depending on how long the wire is, you can have them off to the side, but some of them don't have that capability, and you have to actually flip the switch on the machine itself. So if you're trying to make it look like something's coming out of the ground in the scene, it'll be a bit harder to get right. So having that extra option of either a wired or a wireless control can give you a little bit more options when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with it. The other thing to think about when buying one of these machines is what it's called the output that they give, which is the speed that the machine will fill the room. So if you're using a Haze machine, particularly where you want it to spread across the whole room, you want to see how quickly it can do that. And again, how much liquid is it going to use for certain spaces. Then there's the use cycle and how long it can go for. So like with the fog machine that requires it to warm up before using it, how long can it go for before it needs to shut down and recharge, or basically like reset. And then the reliability of it and how often it breaks down, because you don't want to use something that's unreliable and get a piece of equipment that's going to break down in the middle of your set. And then you can't have that look anymore, and you have to stop production for the day, or you have to figure out a way around it. All those things are going to be awful. So you want to make sure to buy something that is reliable and that has good reviews. Do your research before buying one, because they're all different brands and different, different levels of professionality. They're all made with different pieces of equipment and gear and material. So you want to check and see that it actually works well enough for you to use it over and over again, or continuously for the whole entire day, or multiple weeks, or however long you need to do that shoot and that scene for. Last thing that I also wouldn't really recommend is some people use a bee smoker with wood chips to actually get like that slow burn that leaves a larger trail. But again, this is actually smoke. It's actually burning something. So you can't inhale it. So it would need to be outside. And it doesn't really work if it's windy. Neither does the fog or the haze. Nothing really works if it's going to be windy if you're using it outdoors. Haze especially is going to be really hard to get right outside, because it's just going to go all over the place and spread out, and then it's going to leave the area. But if you're using fog or smoke, those things can sit for a while, and in certain areas, they don't move around too much if it's not windy. But if it's windy, it'll get blown wherever the wind's blowing. So you just want to be sure to know, what you're using it for and where and how it's going to work before you get it there. But yeah, some people will use the bee smoker because it tends to leave a larger trail behind it as it's going. So if you're doing some kind of scene outside, or you need it to look like fire, they might use this instead, so that there's a bigger trail of smoke compared to fog machines or something like that, where it dissipates a little bit quicker or it spreads out faster. But again, I would only use this if you're using it away from your set, away from your actors. If you're just using it for one shot or something like that that's far away from camera, it should be fine. If you're trying to use it right up on the actors, I would go with something else that isn't as dangerous to breathe in. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the fog or haze machines?
I have a haze machine. I have used a fog machine, but that was a long time ago. I know fog machines, fog more or less sticks to the ground a lot more, like you had mentioned. So it's kind of like getting to know the differences between the two and what you acquire from them. I wouldn't recommend. I mean, you can use fog inside, but like if you're using fog in like your in the space of your room or your bedroom or something like that, you could fill the room up. And I know fog is really, really thick. So like if your intent is to diffuse the light and get some kind of light, some kind of shape out of your light, I wouldn't recommend the fog. Fog is really good for covering stuff up and hiding things. So like if your intent is like, oh, I just want to haze up the background a little bit and get some rays going on, I wouldn't go with the fog. I would definitely go with the haze. And like you had mentioned, there's different, the haze, the liquid that comes with it, there's different kinds and different settings to get it thicker and thinner. we have used some outdoors, and like you said, it doesn't last long. So like right before the take, we would have to run the machine for like a minute, wait, and then roll camera, and then if there was a long take, at some point the haze would disappear. So we would have to cut. Yeah, so and it was a nightmare too, because luckily we were in the woods, so the trees kind of helped like keep everything in one spot. But every now and then the wind would blow and it would just disappear. So
Right.
it's one of those things like you would want to, if you know you're going to be shooting outside, I would suggest like maybe a thicker haze or whatever. And on top of that, we had like really good machine. This is like with really good haze machines, like professional ones that they use in theater, stage plays and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we were trying to spray it outside. It was like, yeah, every time. Wasted so much juice. I like you had said, do your research on them to see, because I do know some of them, the cheaper ones mostly, like they have a recharge time. So it's like you'll push the button, you hold it, and then when you want to do another take, you have to wait like 10 minutes for it to heat up again to be able to push the button. So some are like, they're geared to go. Like you can push the button all day and it'll just, just as long as you got the liquid in there, it's gonna spray it out. But yeah, you want to do your research to make sure, because it is really annoying having to wait for the thing to charge up. You're good to go, and then all of a sudden, oh, we gotta wait for the haze, we gotta wait for the fog.
Right.
But
Yeah.
just know that.
And then sometimes if you're using it, you have to wait for it to kind of spread out through the room and dissipate. So it's not even just waiting on the reheating; it's waiting on it to be done after you spray it out too.
That, and then there's it also can affect your continuity as well. Like if you're using it indoors, you would want a thinner haze, because sometimes like you don't clear it out as much and you can still see it, like you know what I mean, like you can still see it between characters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One shot you'll see the haze in the background, and the other shot you'll see less of it, and it just I mean, it looks awesome if it's done right, but you just want to be. Oh, and those cans of can of haze, those are expensive. They're like $20 a can. So
Oh,
like,
geez, okay.
if you want to spend the money on it, like go for it. But yeah, it's beneficial to have like a couple just in case. Just have a couple in your car. But I wouldn't rely on it like everything we're gonna do with. I would just go ahead and get the shit. Oh, and also they make hell of a mess. Like they leak everywhere. So like I would suggest, if you are going to get one, get like a container, a big old plastic box to keep it in, because they leak like crazy. And then what else? Like you had mentioned, they do set off the smoke. They will set off the smoke detectors, but it takes a while. Like you would just be sitting around not thinking anything, and the next thing you know, it goes off. Like, but it's not one of those things. Like it's not like a cigarette. Those are set up the smoke detector quick, but like the haze machine, it'll take a while. I think it's mainly the haze. I don't think the fog machine will. I know the haze machine will, and that's the reason why. The reason why is because haze generates some kind of heat, and I think that's what kind of sets off the detector. It's like it'll get really hot in a room, and then the detector will go off. So
Okay.
I think that's what the whole situation is. And as far as the sprinklers go, I think it's the same principle. The detectors go off and they'll alert the fire department. And then depending on the temperature, it depends on whether or not the sprinklers go off or not. So if it gets super hot, then those sprinklers, but it takes a lot to get those things to go off.
Right. Okay, cool. I also did want to add that there was somebody who was saying that, if you don't have a haze machine and you have a fog machine already, you can get somewhat of a look of haze. You just have to spray it, and then you have to like waft it out, making sure it spreads across the room and wait for it to kind of dissipate and spread. But it's going to be a lot harder to get those consistent look, and it's going to be a lot longer, because you have to wait for it to dissipate and get spread throughout the room, and you have to use somebody to wave a big plastic board at it or something to get it to spread, because it's coming out as a big cloud. So it doesn't really work as well as a haze machine, and it's a lot harder to keep consistent. and it just takes longer. But it is an option if you have no other option to go with and you want that.
And the reason why is because it's so thick. And like I said, it's mainly for hiding stuff as opposed to like shaping lights. It's so thick and it sticks to the ground. So if you're waving it, you have to wave it like up, and it'll only stay in the air for so long because it's gonna fall back down to the ground. And then once you get it in the air, like I said, it's so thick because it's, like I said, it's meant for hiding stuff. So like, how they make, it's like driving around in foggy conditions. They make fog lights because you can't see the ground when you're driving. So they have low lights so you can see the ground, because the ground disappears when you're driving in fog. So like that's the whole purpose of it. It's meant to hide things. Like if you ever watch wrestling, the Undertaker comes out, they'll send the fog machines out, but you can't see the man's feet, so it looks like he's floating on a cloud as he's coming out to the ring. That's what that's for. But it can be used as for haze purposes. But like you had said, you're going to be sitting there waiting for it to
for it to go, for it to dissipate and get thinner. You're gonna be waving your hands around in your giant poster board, trying to get it to go through the room. All right, so moving on from that, we're going to talk about snow machines. Snow machines, there's different, the ones when you actually buy a machine, kind of like this, like the little consumer ones, what there usually are is going to be foam, evaporating foam that's spraying out. That makes it look kind of like it is snowing. So it would look something like that. It sprays out the foam. It's a bit thicker at the top, but then at the bottom, it starts kind of separating and becoming little bubbles, looking kind of like snowflakes. There's a lot of other ways that they do snow than just the foam. Foam is if you want to get that falling look. So you'll use a machine kind of like this or that, and you'll see the foam spraying out. Some of the foam will stick to the ground, like you'll see in the picture. In the bottom left, you can see that some of the foam is, sticking to the ground, so it works all right. But it's not going to stay as long as you need it to if you have a scene there. It's really just there to have like a falling of snow. That's what these machines are usually for.
I need the phone to check the time on this.
Okay, 1 second, guys.
No, you can still talk. I just need to look at it on the page. You can still talk.
There are like large machines, professional machines that will have a solution that will spit out evaporating. Oh wait, this is not what I was just talking about. Oh, some of them have like a stickier foam that clings to objects, people's clothing a little bit more than others. And some of them have the thinner ones that dissipate a lot quicker to look like just like it's falling snow, but it's not sticking to anyone's clothing. So you'd have to do your research to see which one you're getting. If you want it to stick to people's clothing, it can look realistic or it can look very fake depending on what the solution is made out of. So you really want to check it out and see what that specific machine is doing and what it looks like, and if you like the look of it or not before you get it. Then there's something called paper snow. Paper snow looks like the thing I have on the screen. This is where the large machines come in, the more professional machines they have, that they put these paper in, and it separates in a separate machine where it will take the paper, it'll shred it in a certain way to have it clumped together to make it look kind of like snow. And then it'll be sent through a tube with a mixture of water so that they're able to shoot it out over an area. And this is used to make large areas look like it's covered with snow.
Let me know when the timer goes off, okay?
All right.
Oh, whew, I thought I closed it.
So you'll have paper snow that has different thicknesses and consistencies. You'll have it be a little bit thicker like that, or in clumps, looking kind of a little cloudy at the bottom. Or you can have it be very fine, looking kind of like snow dust, like you'll see in the picture right here. So there's different consistencies, different textures that you can get, but they are paper. So it is all just paper, and it can, usually these aren't used indoors because it's paper and because that's a fire hazard. obviously, paper catches on fire very easily. So if there's anything like a light that's too close to the snow, well, the quote unquote snow, it can catch it on fire. And then if it falls to the ground on fire and it's with the rest of that paper, you're going to have a huge fire spread across the whole room really quickly. So typically these things are only used outdoors in large areas to make it look like snow, and not used on indoor sets that are made to look like outside. Those will use other things to make it look like snow rather than the paper snow like you see on the picture. After paper snow, you have what's called a snow blanket. And you can see these if you ever go into a Christmas store, you'll see these. Let me exit out these pictures real quick. They're used they put it around the gifts and they put it around the stuff like that to make it look like, it's on a pile of snow. It looks more like cotton than it does snow if you get really close. So typically speaking, these will only be used to help cover very large areas for a scene. And they'll usually be used farther away from the camera in conjunction with like the paper snow and the foam to make it look like all the elements work together, like it's a snowy area, even if it's summer or even if it's spring or not snowing. But if you put it kind of the snow blankets kind of like that, you spread it across an area and you step away from it, it can look realistic. It can look pretty good. But of course, once you start getting closer and closer to it, you're going to notice that it looks more like cotton. It's probably made out of cotton, and it's not going to look realistic anymore, which is why it's not usually used close up. They can also be very expensive depending on where you're getting them from. If you're just buying them from like a visual effects or a special effects website, they can go for a couple $100 for a pretty large one, but still it's can get expensive. So you also want to be aware of that. Well, and then of course, you have visual effects added to enhance and extend the snow look. So if you're covering a certain distance, you might have a green screen in the background, or just have somewhere where the visual effects people are going to cover the ground with digital snow, and they might add extra snow in the air to make it look like snow is falling. So you'll have a mixture of practical effects and visual effects to make all of those things come together and make snow. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or things to add about snow machines, or anything like that? One of the videos on the syllabus, by the way, shows, I'm not sure which one, but one of the ones that are talking about the snow, I think it might be the first one, how Hollywood movies make snow. It shows those big machines. I couldn't really find a picture of it online, but they show the pictures, the video of the machines that make that paper snow. And with the water mixture, they kind of just put it over any area and they spray it out. And it basically immediately attaches to whatever it hits because it has that mixture, and then it stays there clumped, looking like snow spread across the entire area. All right, moving on from that. Oh, you have something to add, Brian?
No, I just wanted to add a question. Did you research anything about what is it? The fire suppression system is like, I think it's Halon or something like that.
Why is it so quiet?
I don't know why. Fire suppression systems?
Yeah, like it's like this stuff they use instead of water. It's like whatever it pretty much smothers the fire out. It sucks away all the oxygen. But
like the foam, like the I think it's a certain kind of foam again.
Yeah,
that they spray up, like they shoot into actual fires to make it. It's kind of like a fire hydrant. What's in there, right?
yeah. Did you you heard anything about them using that stuff? Because I've seen it in action. And it's like the second it hits it, like because the system goes off and it doesn't stop until it runs out, and it will run for like hours, and pretty much like it's like you know, when it gets outside, like it just covers everything, but it looks like snow, like identical to snow.
Huh, no, I haven't seen it.
But I'm sure it's like some kind of like safety thing with it. I'm not sure, but I mean, if you're not getting any actors around, if you're just using it to, you know, make a scene, I guess it would look pretty cool. I don't know, but I'm
Right.
just curious. That's all.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they use that, especially for like large, like blizzard looks. There were also, I did see some machines that shoot out actual ice, like you put ice into it or something like that, and they do actually shred it down into snow, but it, you know, obviously it melts really quickly and goes away. But they
Yeah.
sometimes will use that just to make it look like there's a huge gust of wind with the snow falling. So yeah, I'm sure it's like a mixture of what set you're on with what they're using for the snowfall. But yeah, that's cool. Like the kind of like the, wow, I don't know, I know what you're talking about. It's the stuff where you'll see like a firefighter outside and they'll be shooting into a window and they're getting the stuff into the room to make the fire go away, because they don't just use water for it because it's not as effective.
Yeah.
So shooting that up into the air and making it fall will look like a snowfall, like a very heavy snowfall. I'm sure they use that a lot.
Or you could just wait till a snowy day and just shoot in the snow.
Yeah, if you have the ability to do that, sure.
I've seen a guy.
For the most realistic, especially with the larger budgeted productions, they actually go to locations that are snowy like all the time and shoot there for certain scenes, especially just to make sure that it's as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
But the problems with snow, though, if you're using it on set, whether it's fake or real, people's footprints and any kind of machinery you're using around the area is going to be noticeable, and you're going to have to reset and kind of like, you know, find a way to paint over it. Sometimes that'll be used in visual effects as well to eliminate tracks, eliminate footprints. Because if you do have real snow or if you do have fake snow, all those, it's going to start getting a notice that somebody's been moving around on set. It's going to look uglier because mud's going to start getting mixed with it. So to keep that very beautiful looking scene, they have to like do a bunch of tricks to make sure that it's not getting affected. All right, moving on from snow, we're going to talk about rain. So there's not really any like rain machines exactly. On a more professional set, you'll have what's called a rain tower, like you'll see in this image, and it's attached to some kind of tube that runs the water up through it to spray out and make it look more like rain in a certain area. And they'll do more or less depending on how much they want it to look like how much it's raining. But there aren't exactly like machines like with snow or with fog or haze like you'll find on the consumer level. So on the consumer level, you're trying to do rain, you can use, obviously on the cheapest end, you can just get a garden hose, tape around the outside of it, or find some way to block part of it so that it sprays out with a lot of pressure from one smaller hole. And then as it falls, it'll be rain, but it doesn't really cover that big of an area. And you know, you have to make sure that you have enough water to just keep spraying it out in the same direction for however long you need it. But that is like on the easiest level, that's the way to do it. Professionals on the professional level, they also sometimes will use cranes, like in the picture, and they'll have a water system with certain areas where it has sprinklers pointing upwards or downwards, depending on how far up it is. And the water will be sent up to that, and it'll spray down in a larger area so that the crane, so that it's coming from above, so that's not coming from any kind of angle. That's why they'll use something like this, so they can cover exactly what they need and have it come straight from above like real rain would. Some also use fire hydrants when they're available, but those have requirements. Of course, you can't just go and start using a fire hydrant. You have to get approved for it, and you have to be able to use it. And you probably have to have a specialized person on set again to use something like a fire hydrant, because it's used for the for real life applications. So you can't just go and use it if you want. But those are something that they typically use to get like the continuous water flow into their scenes. On independent sets, if you're trying to make a do-it-yourself kind of machine, or kind of like a rigging, I would say more of like a rig. One guy, Tom Antos, he uses a PVC pipe, a hose, some connectors and plugs to create that do-it-yourself rain machine. So he connects all the different PVC pipe together with different, like the ends and connectors to make it all stay together. And then he uses PVC concrete to make sure they don't come loose when the water goes through it. And there's a lot of pressure and a lot of weight added to it. As you can see in the picture, the bar kind of bends down, and that's because all the water going into it is in the middle before it's spraying out. And that's causing a lot of the weight to be in the middle distributed, kind of like in a pipe. So you make sure that you get it, and you do it pretty, you make sure that it's strong and that it's not going to fall apart. And that's why he used things like the PVC concrete and all of that kind of stuff. But you can basically just go to your Home Depot or another home department store and buy these different pieces, sprinkler heads, and PVC pipe and some stands. And then, well, actually he used his light stands for this, but you can buy more PVC pipe to go from the ground up to hold it up. And then you just send it through a hose and it'll spray across. And it's a pretty big area. It's not as big as you'd get from one of those professional cranes and stuff like that, but it is an area where it'll fall down and spread across the way. You just have to make sure it's high enough to where you won't be having it in shot for whatever you're using it for. When shooting rain, if you've ever shot rain before, you'll notice that it's not really noticeable. You'll see some scenes. I've actually seen some shows. I actually watched Peaky Blinders, one of the episodes the other day, where it wasn't really supposed to be raining. And I couldn't tell that it was raining until I saw some water dripping off of one of the characters' hats. And that's because rain isn't really noticeable if you don't do anything with it, if there's nothing added to it to make it look
on camera.
Yeah, it doesn't appear on camera as well. So you have to do some tricks with it to make sure that it's showing. And usually what they'll do is they'll add light, shine it in a certain direction to make sure that the light is getting reflected off the rain so you can see it as it passes. If you have access to wherever the water is coming from, you will maybe add some people added milk or something that's has a little bit more color in it, so that it's not really too noticeable that it's a different color, but it will be showing up on set a lot easier.
Near windows or stuff where you can see the droplets, since they stay there as well.
Yeah.
Because what they can't see is the water moving as much, so they'll try to focus on like window shots where you can kind of see the droplets and stuff like that. And then they'll focus on the noise of it, or if they're not shooting like a shot in the rain, like directly in the rain outside.
But if they are shooting the actual rain, then they typically oversaturate it, overexpose it, and sometimes we'll add some kind of color, something with color to it so that it shows up on camera, because otherwise it won't. If you ever try taking a picture of rain, it's pretty hard. You really can't get it unless you're pointing light at it directly. So it doesn't show up on camera as much as it does with our eyes.
We lower the shutter speed, right?
Yeah, but even then it won't show up too well on camera.
It'll show up somewhat blurry, but it'll show up way more.
That's the other thing about it. If you're doing a film, you're shooting at 24 frames per second, and the raindrops, they're really fast. And that's why another reason they won't really show up on camera as much as you would have if you were shooting at a higher shutter speed. But even still, it needs some kind of light for the camera to pick it up, to reflect it. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add to that? Rain, or making a do-it-yourself rain machine. Oh yeah, this is right. Backgrounds also help. Making putting something in the background so that it's easier to see the rain falling in front of it.
Well, also, I was gonna say to add to that, like you have this wide shot here, like puddles of water. And you can see the water splashing. If your intent is not to catch the rain, but kind of gesture that it's actually raining. And like Priscilla was saying, glass is a big one. You can see like the little water droplets. The actors themselves, the clothing will be wet and whatnot. They have an umbrella up. You would be able to see like the water bouncing off the umbrella and stuff like that. But as far as like it's big Hollywood, a lot of their rain scenes is done in a production house, in a studio where they can control it, and they'll do a lot of to kind of light up the rain from the back. But they also have what is called a grid, which is kind of like a fire suppression system, but it's just like not a fire. So it's not intended to put fires out. It's just it's a grid that they hang up, and it has rows because
Kind of like
you're not gonna you don't want to flood it, so it has like different rows. It has like a front, the foreground, middle ground, and then the background is really all you really need, without like drenching your actors, because that's another thing too. If you have too much water, it'll kind of affect the performance a little bit, unless that's the intent. But yeah, you'll have foreground, middle ground, and then background to kind of give the illusion that it's raining, but you're not actually like drenching the whole entire set. You're just getting certain parts wet to kind of give the illusion that it's raining. Other than that, for the low budget, if you're not, the PVC pipe, to me, that PVC pipe trick is gold, is butter. I mean, other than that, you're stuck with a sprinkler, which could work. But if I were to do it like let's say a car scene, car scenes are like the go-to. Like the character's inside the car, the camera's outside the car. You can see the water like drizzling on top of the car, or the character's like standing next to the window, and you can see the droplets of rain or something like that. Is like the big go-to. But like for the particular shot here that you got on screen, yeah, you gotta have to have like the PVC pipe system or something like that, because just a normal water hose isn't gonna cover all of that.
Right, it'll be too small, and you won't be able to. It'll be obvious that it's only raining down in one area instead of all over the place like you want it to. Unless you want it to look like that, like the Truman Show. That's like the only use case I could see for you wanting it to stay down in a small area.
Then there's also CGI. I don't recommend I don't recommend that either. CGI or any of that stuff. I know Vegas has like this simulated rain. It's terrible. It's it's nothing good. Like they make Premiere. I think Premiere has like a snowy filter where it places snow in your footage, but it looks so fake because it's only on the foreground. It's like hard to get it in the background. But of course, CGI artists can.
For one of our projects, Coda put snow on me in the back. It looks so bad. It looks so fake. It was supposed to be fake, looking fake for an exercise. It was an exercise, but still, I was like, "Whoo, that looks bad."
Yeah, but
yeah, it's hard to get because snow and water and anything that's in the air, but also interacts with any environment. It's hard to match and get right because there's so many different things it's interacting with. The person's hair.
Yeah, if you're very creative, you should be able to do it without even, you wet your character up. You use a lot of sound effects to give the illusion that it's probably raining. You know what I mean? And then smart. You can get away with it. Oh, it's not really raining. Especially if you're shooting at night. These are questions you have to ask. Like, am I going to shoot at night? Because normally, like especially big Hollywood, their whole niche is like wet the ground, wet the floor and stuff like that. So like if you're shooting at night, you know, the ground becomes more reflective. So it's kind of easier to say, oh, well, it is raining. It's just a light rain or it's a drizzle or something like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the hard part comes in whenever you're trying to make it like it's a storm or it's heavy rain, then you have to really make sure you're getting the droplets in the air right.
And then on top of that, you have to wait for the, you know, it's not going to be raining on a sunny day. I mean, it does. I've seen it rain on a sunny day, but it's not believable. Like, oh,
right,
it's storming and the sun is out. So,
yeah. Yeah. So then that's like where visual effects for the sky would come in, or now, but even then it's like the colors are all different than what it really would be. So there's a lot that goes into trying to recreate weather. All right, so moving on from that, that's our special effects stuff. There's plenty of other special effects equipment out there, but I just thought we would touch on some of the stuff out there and what you want to look out for, because otherwise we'll be here too long. But moving on from that, we're going to be talking about Patreon. Patreon, this actually comes from Jay Horton from A in the syllabus. Patreon tips for filmmakers in 2020. So it was, maybe like 2 years ago that he was talking about it. Patreon, if you guys don't know what it is, it's a website where fans or supporters can subscribe and pay a monthly amount to their favorite creators. So when using Patreon, you need to keep your fan base engaged by having perks or exclusive content for them. It's kind of like you would if you were trying to do a crowdfunding website. But this is trying to be continuous to get a fan base to keep giving you money to help you in your endeavors and your projects and things like that. So it's a lot more engaged. You have to be a lot more engaged with your audience and keep them engaged and keep them coming back for more. Otherwise, they'll stop paying and they'll cancel their subscription. Because it's subscription based, they are doing it over and over again. So instead of someone giving you $500, they might be paying you $25 a month and just continuously doing that. So there are pros and cons with it. If you can build a good fan base with it, then you're going to already have fans for whatever your projects are, and you'll be able to, you'll have backers that are paying you to see what you can make with it. So that's always a good thing, but it's really hard to get people to do that. So like with crowdfunding sites, you're going to have that 99.1% thing where it's like 90% of your people are just going to follow you. They're just going to look. They're lurkers. They're only going to look at your stuff. They're never going to do anything. 9% might like your stuff or comment, but they're not going to do anything beyond that. And 1% might be the ones that really help you and really try to get your stuff complete and help you however they can. And one of the ways they do that is with money. With things like Patreon and things like that. So you can have a fan base already built up, but you're not going to get as many fans. And if you have a huge 2 million subscribers on YouTube, not like 1% or less are going to be the ones that actually help you out with anything like Patreon or a crowdfunding thing. So just keep that in mind. But just like with crowdfunding websites, you have perks and rewards and different tiers of rewards for different patrons. Patrons are the ones who pay you and they're subscribed to you and they get different perks. And some of those, you can choose whatever you want, but you really want to get creative with it and be different and give them something personal that they can't get somewhere else, just like you would if you were doing crowdfunding. Since we talked a lot about crowdfunding, I'm kind of just going to skim through some of the Patreon stuff. A lot of the same stuff applies as far as trying to build up your fan base before you create it, because nobody's going to find you on Patreon.
For people that they already know and want to support.
Yeah, they're not just going to be able to.
There isn't a search bar in the website either. There's not like a place where you can go and like, oh, creators you might want to support. At least not that I know of yet.
There's a search bar here on the screen on the actual website, but you have to search for a person, a name, or the name of a company or a channel.
Yeah, there's not like a highlight reel.
It's not like here are these, 50,000. You want to look for filmmakers like you would on a crowdfunding site like Kickstarter, where you can look up filmmakers and projects and find individual projects that you might want to look for. So if you're a regular to Kickstarter and you're just going there to help filmmakers because you want to, you're not going to really be able to do that with Patreon. You need to know who you're subscribing to, or what their name is or what their channel is before you go to them. So Patreon is more for the people that already know you. There's more for your fan base you already have. And so they recommend, just like with a crowdfunding site, try to get onto social media and those other things and build up some kind of fan community before you bring them over to Patreon and try to start getting paid from it. Again, unlike crowdfunding sites, it's going to be a continuous thing. So you have to continuously have something to offer. And it's not really like a one-off reward kind of thing. It's like you want to try to keep people coming back, keep them engaged, keep responding. A lot of people that do YouTube and Patreon will post content to Patreon first for a certain amount of time before YouTube. So they'll have like the exclusive first look at their videos for a certain time. Filmmakers, you might post tutorials, explainer videos, behind the scenes of your content, questionnaires or Q&A, live Q&A sessions, things like that. There's many different ways you can offer value to your fans. And if you have people that are paying you to see what you can come up with, they're going to be more inclined to want to hear from you and talk to you and ask you questions about your process or how what you thought of or how you thought of that idea, or, things like that. They're going to be more interested in doing that if they're paying you to follow along with what you're doing. Fish said, is it subscription based? Yeah, so it's you can, I believe you can have like one-off payment things with this site, but typically speaking, most people, the majority subscribe to the creator. So they subscribe, there's certain tiers. It's like level 1 will be, maybe $10, $15, $20. You can charge whatever you want for.
There are some people that like do like, oh, if you'd like to help us out, you can do like a $1, you can do like a pledge, like $1 a month or $2, or like $2 per video or stuff like that I've heard of as well.
Yeah, so you have to set the rates and you have to set the rewards and perks that they get for that rate. So, it's up to the individual to do the research and figure out what they can charge, what their fans will pay, and, set their limits and figure out what they want to do for their perks. But it is subscriber based. So one of the things that's a negative about it is you can't really count on it for an income, because your income can change month to month. You're going to have a different amount of subscribers each month. Some will drop out for whatever reason. Some will join in. So you might get more money that month and less money the next month, and even less money the month after, but then go back to what you had 3 months before. So it's just like it bounces around a lot. But like with crowdfunding, you want to make sure you get creative with your perks. Don't be boring and do the standard things. Use something that are use some that are like the standard things, like, offering somebody to be a associate producer. You'll get associate producer credit, or I'll name everybody who is my patrons in my videos or my film in the credits. Those are cool, but they're pretty standard. And so they're not as unique as some of the other stuff that you might be able to do. And more unique is like, you're the unique thing. You're the unique aspect in it. So whatever you can give them, you can give them live questions and answer sessions, or you can post some of your content before you actually make it. You're posting the idea, you're posting the development phases of it, getting some feedback from them early on. Things like that can add more personal and unique perks.
You get a lot of people do like early releases to stuff, like, oh, my new video, my new short. You did that? Okay, I didn't know it was in the kitchen.
Yeah, so other people will do like early release, like if I have if it's a YouTuber, if I have a new video coming out.
They do customized artwork as well. Like I've heard of people who are artists, they'll do like their customized artwork for their projects and stuff. They'll have people vote on stuff so they can feel like part of it. They'll do live chats once a month.
Some people for filmmaking, I've heard they do like, you can write a scene or you can add a character. I'll add your character name into it. You know, those kinds of things. Or you can have some feedback directly to me about the project that I'm writing, you know, where you still have creative control. You're gonna make sure you don't really give up creative control, you know, unless you're willing to do that. You really want to watch out for that and make sure you're not giving up anything. You should have the final say in your creative project. But to add value to people, you can have them give you some feedback, give them some of their ideas. You know, maybe they like your films, they're willing to pay you, and they want some feedback on their project. So maybe that could be a perk. I'll review any project you give to me, and I'll have feedback to you within 2 weeks, a month, whatever. That way you can give feedback to people about their projects, and they can see if they are making something that you would approve of, because they're paying you, so they obviously like your work and want to see what you can do. Vish asked, do creators have to pay as well? Yeah, I'm going to get into those in a second. The creators have to pay, the website takes their fees and stuff like that. So I'll get in that in just a second. But yeah, you always just want to, with Patreon especially, you want to be engaging with your community and fans, reply to everybody if they comment on anything, get involved, talk to them, get them involved to get feedback to you. And the more they feel like they're a part of the creative process, this is for filmmaking, you know, obviously, but for everything that you do on Patreon, a lot of it is creative stuff. And you want to, everybody likes to feel like they're a part of doing that creative thing. So the more they feel like they can give input and that their input is heard and or their feedback is heard, the more likely they are to keep subscribing to get that, to keep it going. I heard one guy said he made some people executive producer if they did $250 a month on like his feature films, and he was making like one a year or something. So they would actually be executive producer, and it wouldn't just be a title. He would actually allow them to get involved. He would make sure to tell them that, you know, he has ultimate creative control, so they're not going to be able to say something and it goes over him, but they are going to be able to give feedback and input where it actually can affect the outcome of the final piece. And so, you know, some people are really willing to get involved with that. And he was saying the crazy thing about Patreon is that your fans are paying you. And if you can get them to work on your set, you're actually having somebody that's going to pay you to be on your set. Where the other way to do that, you would have to pay the person out of pocket, or, you know, find some way of funding to pay them. But in this instance, your fan base pays you and then also works for your set for free while paying you for it. So it's kind of crazy if you can get it to work, but it is an option, and there's a lot of people that do it, and they, you know, you're not going to make a fortune on it most likely, but it is a way to help build some funds. And it's especially a way to just build a fan base, to get a community that's interested and involved with your work and wants to see it get made, so that if you do have a project, it is going to be easier for you to get funding for it, because you can say, hey, I have so and so many people subscribing to me, paying me to make this next project. And so, you know, my diehard fan base, it's probably going to go out and spread the word whenever I release this thing. And that's going to give you a little bit more leverage when trying to talk to investors and things like that to get some funding for your next project. Like Priscilla said, there's no Discover tab like there is on other sites. So you really have to get the people to know you, because no one's going to stumble upon your Patreon. There's no one on Patreon that's going to be able to just look through filmmakers and find you. You're going to have to get them outside of Patreon to come to Patreon later. And so that can be a little bit harder than something like Kickstarter, where you can actually look up individual things. If you want to donate to a video game company or independent projects that are creating video games, you can easily look that up and find them. Whereas on Patreon, you're not going to be able to find video game companies just from searching for it, because there's no kind of discover feature on this site as of yet. So for Patreon for the creators, they have 3 creator plans with various support tools and fees. Platform fees for using the site range from 5% of the profits for the basic creator plan, 8% for pro, and 12% for premium. Additionally, there are processing fees for each donation you receive. So it's like 2.9% plus 30 cents per successful payment that's over $3, 5% plus 10 cents for every successful payment under $3. Then there are payout fees, which vary depending on how you're transferring your money out of Patreon. And if you're in the US, if you're in the US or not, because if you're not in the US, this is a US site. So if you're outside of the US, it's a little bit more of international fees and things like that that go up in price a bit. It's not too expensive, 25 cents for direct deposit. So if you're getting a direct deposit straight from Patreon to your bank, it's going to be 25 cents only. It's going to be 1% plus 25 cents, where it maxes out at $20 if you're transferring it to PayPal. So you can get your funds to PayPal, but you're going to end up paying $20 or less, depending on how much you're taking out. And then it's $3 for a payout to your bank account. So if you're not getting direct deposit, you're just transferring it to your bank. It would cost $3 per time you're doing that. So all those together, it takes out a chunk of that funding. So even if you're getting funding from a lot of people, you can still end up losing quite a bit of it just from the platform fees and things like that. Like if you have the premium plan of Patreon, that's 12% taken out of your profits just from say if you're making $100, they take out $12, just like that. And then every time somebody's giving you money, you're paying those credit card fees or whatever they're using. There's fees to it to transfer money from one place to another. So you're paying almost 3% of that payment. So if someone gives you like $3 or $1, let's say $1, it's easier. They're going to take out 3 cents. If they're giving you $100, they're going to take out $3. So then you only get $97 from it. And then after that, you get that 12% or that 8% or 5% taken off, depending on your plan. And then more of that money comes out. And then when you're transferring it to your bank, it takes out $3, which is the cheapest out of all these things, but it's still something that's coming out of that money. I think like the basic plan, it comes with only one tier. You don't have a multi-tier for your fans. Whereas the pro plan and the premium plan you can do up to 3 or more, or you can do like Priscilla said, you can do somebody like giving $1 a month for your lowest tier, and all you get is like a thank you or a credit or whatever. And then $5, $10, $25, however much you want to charge for the next tier up, where they get access to other things and other perks. And then higher up, they get access to even more perks. And you can do as many as you want, but typically speaking, most people will do 3 tiers, just so it's not as confusing. It's not too confusing for you or for them, because then you have to think of all these perks that they get for paying the higher price. The payments are processed the first of each month, so creators can withdraw then, or they can wait just in case there's any declined card payments that came through. And if the person's trying to repay you, if their credit card got declined, it might take a few days for them to repay. And so like if there is stuff like that, you might want to wait, but you are able to process the payment every month. Typically speaking, a lot of people will wait for like a few days just in case those declined credit card things happen and people are actually still trying to pay them. So it might be like the 5th of the month or something like that, but your funding comes in each 1st of the month when everybody is charged staying on the subscription. So you can't actually do those individual one-time payment things. It's just not what the site's for. The site is more for the subscription-based model. but there is an option to just have like a one-off donation from a fan if you want to add that into your thing. So that's that. I mean, there are some alternatives to Patreon. I'm not gonna. This one's more for podcasts, Podia, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Those are more of like a crowdfunding campaigns that are one-off. But then you have stuff like Memberful, which you can sell memberships to people, kind of like you do with the Patreon. Platform fees and monthly charges are dependent upon which subscription package you purchase. So it's kind of like Patreon again, where you decide what kind of a creator package you're getting, what you're going to pay to use it. There's, I think it's LiberaPay. Those have the recurring donations platform. So it's the subscription based again. There's no platform fees or monthly fees. Only payment processing fees are taken out of what you earn. It's for donations, not payments in return for your products and services. So it is pretty good where it doesn't have fees. It's just that these are, if you're trying to get people to pay you through these things, some of these sites, these alternatives aren't as well known. And so you might lose some people just because they don't want to pay or add their credit card to some site that they never heard of before. Whereas a lot of people have heard of Patreon, know what it is, and know it's legit. So they're not going to be as worried about entering their information into it to pay. So that is something to consider when you're talking about alternatives to Patreon. If you're trying to run a site like it, if you're trying to run a subscription like that or whatever, you just want to be sure that you know you're going to lose out on some people if you're not using the most well-known one. It's kind of like using Kickstarter instead of using something else, because Kickstarter is the most well-known crowdfunding site. So it has a bigger platform and it has more people that donate to it. Same thing with Patreon. More people are going to donate to it because they know what it is compared to some of these others. And then there's Ko-Fi or Coffee, maybe. It looks like a little coffee cup. All-in-one platform for managing crowdfunding campaigns, selling memberships or products, and receiving donations. There's no platform fees on donations. Premium features like memberships and commissions are available for 5% platform fee or just $6 a month. So there's another one that's a lot cheaper. Something called Gumroad. It allows you to sell memberships, digital content, physical products, podcasts, and online courses. No monthly fees, and it's free to get started. You're going to sell through your Gumroad profile or directly from your website. So if you have a website, you can connect it directly to that. It's a plus. Fees start at 9% plus 30 cents per transaction, but get lower as you get more sales. So, I mean, that's a little, I don't know. But these are more for some of these are more for courses, like that one. It's more for if you're trying to do tutorial courses that you're charging for, like Full-Time Filmmaker, Tomorrow's Filmmaker, something like that. You might be on this kind of site to charge people per month for new content that you're bringing out, for new classes or courses. Whereas Patreon and one of those other ones, I think LiberaPay and Patreon, they're more of a subscription-based one for any kind of donations that people want to give you, where you have to just keep them engaged, and then whatever they want to give you, they can, and they're not really paying for a course, they're just paying you, so you can continue doing whatever you want. As long as as long as they want to pay you, you can do whatever you want with their money. Then there's Buy Me a Coffee, which is more of just like a one-off kind of thing, where people might pay you a few dollars here or there just to help you on your journey or help you on your next project or whatever it is. So those are some options for people if you ever want to do something like that. But with all of them, you kind of need to have some kind of fan base from the start. And to make it a lot easier anyway, you're going to need a fan base to know how to help you and just to want to help you. Like if you're just some random person doing it, nobody's really going to want to help you. But if they know you, they know what you're doing, they might get a little more interested and be open to helping you, especially if you have any work that you've done in the past that you can show. You might be able to build that audience a bit quicker than just when you're just starting out, which might be a little bit harder. But anybody can start a Patreon or any of these other sites without a fan base, and then try to build it and bring them into Patreon and the others from their other social media and things like that after they started. So you don't have to worry about it if you don't have a fan base yet and you still want to try it. But it is a good option to try to gain some kind of income, and especially just to grow some fans so that you already have a fan base. Whenever you come out with something, you know these people are most likely to watch it and spread the word when you bring anything out, as well as they're helping, get you a little bit of money. So it's always good. But you really just want to look at it how you can give value, like I said, like how you can give value to them and what your unique skills are. Excuse me. If you edit videos, you might be able to do some editing tutorials or show your process, answer questions about different things with editing and how it works. If you direct, you might be able to have some kind of directing course or helping with actors and just give them it free if they want to help with the Patreon, or just give some kind of perks that are a little continuous, but also just, have people that that just give value to your fans, because nobody really wants to. One of the biggest draws for Patreon and all these sites is what they get out of it. They're helping you, but they also kind of want something in return. If you're not offering anything, you're going to get a lot less people interested. And so figuring out some ways to really draw people in, keep them engaged, and keep them coming back to keep giving you more. That's one of the hardest things to do, but it is the best way to get a continuous fan base to give you that income. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to add about Patreon or any of the alternatives? Have you ever used any of them?
You keep talking. I'm on the broiling stage, so it needs to time quickly.
Ask a question. All right. So last thing we're talking about today is going to be AAF files for editing. You guys don't know what that is. AAF files means Advanced Authoring Format. It's used when you're sending audio to a sound editor in post-production. That's the main use. There are something called OMF files, OMF, or Open Media Framework, but it's more of like an older version of the same file format. AAF is used for the same purpose, but it's more recent, is made more recently, and it has more functionality than OMF for the most part. So that's the one that is the standard now. When exporting, you can choose to have the sound files embedded or separate. And you can actually, where am I on that? So if you actually look at this picture right here, this is from Premiere Pro. You can make an AAF file format from Premiere Pro. And if you do, it's going to give you quite a bit of options for you to select or change or deselect whenever you're sending this to your audio team or audio editor if you just have one. When you do embedded, it's just going to have all of the sound files embedded into one file, so that the one file will be bigger, but it will be, what am I trying to say? The one file, it'll be bigger, but it'll have all the sound attached to it. Whereas separate, you'll have it where the all the files come separately, and then there's also the AAF file. And then when you're bringing it in for the audio editor into their DAW or their digital audio workstation, they'll have to relink those sound files to the one. So it just depends on what you're trying to use it for, but most people will say to go ahead and just do embedded so that it's all in one file. It just makes it a bit easier, because when you bring it into the audio workstation, it's going to have separate tracks. It doesn't matter that the sound is all in one file. It just, once you import that one file into the software, the audio software, the digital audio workstation, it is going to show all of the different tracks in the audio, just like it would if it was separate. It'll just be a bit quicker, but it'll just be one larger file. So if that's a problem, if the file size is a problem, then you might want to send it separately. But if there's no issue there, then embedding it's not really going to affect anything as much. Either way, when the AAF file is brought into the digital audio workstation, like Ableton or Pro Tools, the audio is going to appear as it was in the video editing software. It's going to be in separate tracks instead of all compiled into one track, where it would be much harder to edit the audio. So let me go to this picture real quick. If we just brought it in with one track, then it would look like this top track, the green track, where it's all connected. It's all just one file. And that's a lot harder to do and edit. And it doesn't give you as much options whenever you're trying to edit the audio. So you really want to have all the separate elements in separate tracks, like it was in the video editing software, when you're bringing it over to audio to work on the audio. You want to be able to select each individual clip, sound effect, dialogue piece, music, and adjust or change it around so that you can do whatever you want with it, so that the sound editor, the one who's mixing it, the sound mixer, can adjust it easily without adjusting multiple things. If you just brought it in and it was all one track, you would have maybe the sound effect with the dialogue, with the music, all on top of each other, but it would only be able to be edited at once. It would, like if he lowered the volume on it, that one spot, it's going to lower the volume of all three things because it's all on one track. Whereas if it's all separated like this, he can lower the volume of he or she can lower the volume of just the sound effects, just the music, or just the dialogue. And he has a lot more options and control. And of course, if you're doing a sound mix, you want to make sure that they have as much control as possible so they can do it as professionally as possible. So that is why AAF files are used. It's a way to transfer over all of the information. It's kind of like an EDL, like an edit decision list that we were talking about a few weeks ago, where the edit decision list will keep track of what file is used, where the cuts are made, where it is on the timeline, all of those things. But an edit decision list is more for transferring between different video editing softwares, whereas an AAF file is used for transferring between video to audio softwares. So still not really, there's not really a way to transfer them super easily, which is why AAF and OMF were made, so that all of the decisions that were made are kept and maintained so that you can open it up in a different software and it'll open it up how you had it in the video software. The reason AAF files are used is instead of EDLs for audio is because EDL only allows like 2 tracks to be exported, 2 audio tracks, whereas AAF will allow for many, many more. So if you have like 8, 10, 12 audio tracks, you can export all of that so that all the information is maintained and nothing is condensed down or mixed together like you would if you could only use a few tracks at a time. Let me see. When you're sending audio to the sound mixer, you're also going to send a video for like a reference so that they can view it, make sure that everything's synced up and matches for the dialogue and the sound effects and everything while they adjust the sound. And they're going to make sure that they can view it to get the sense of the project while they're watching it and adjusting the sound. Because if the explosion happens really far away on camera, they're probably not going to have it as loud as if the explosion happens really close. The only way they can see that is if they see the actual video. So you'll send a video project with it to give them a reference for what's going on. So if you go to Premiere, you actually have something on the top. You can see it says mix down video. What that does is if you choose it in the AAF file itself, it'll have the video with the sound. But some people say this causes some issues with certain softwares, depending on what kind of software you have. If you're using Mac instead of PC, and what version of the software you have. If you have an older one or something like that, this can sometimes become a problem for whatever reason. So sometimes it'll just be easier to send these separately, send the video separately and send the AAF file separately, and they can just put it together in their audio workstation instead of mixing down the video and sending it all at once. AAF files are they have a lot of information in them. So I guess it's just kind of easy for them to get confusing and hard to open for other softwares. So it can start to be a problem if you're trying to do too much in the same file. And I guess that's why they typically keep it separated and send it as separate files, the video and the audio. But, if it works for your editor, if it works for your audio editor, you can always just send it together as one file. As long as it's not going to cause a problem, it doesn't matter, because then they're still going to have that video reference. You just want to make sure that they have both pieces, the video and the audio, however you do it. So that's what mix down video would be. It means you're adding the video to the AAF export. If you don't do that, just be sure that you send the video separately. Some people even send the video as like a complete export so that it has the audio and the video, so that they have, like we see in this last picture, they have the reference or the guide where it shows how the waveform reacts with all of the sound elements. And they'll also have the separated tracks that they got from that AAF file you exported for them. And so, it just depends on the audio editor, what they want to do and how they want to do it. But that's typically the way a lot of them will. Going down, breakout to mono, you usually want to enable that so that you are creating, if there's a left and a right track, they're just going to separate it into two different tracks, makes it a bit easier. But it might depend on what the audio editor wants. The sound mixer might want you to send it not as all mono, and then you can send it to them together. So if there's a stereo track, it'll look as one, and they won't be able to adjust the left and right as much or as easily. But typically speaking, you'll want to enable that. Let me see. Then there's render audio clip effects. So that's something you might want to do if you want to send over a reference of what you were going for. If you adjusted any kind of audio element, you adjusted the level, you adjusted the reverb, you adjusted the EQ, you did something to it to change the way it sounds, and you want to send it over as a reference point, then you will check that little box of rendering audio clip effects. The next box, if you select render audio effects, it will highlight this one, and you'll be able to check it if you want, where it says include clip copies without effects. What that's going to do is it's going to send a copy of the file or the audio clip without the effects, as well as the clip with the effects. So then they don't have to keep your reference point. They can just hear what you like and then replace it with the clip without the audio effects, so they can make their adjustments their own. So, some of the audio editors were saying, some of the sound mixers, were saying that they might keep an audio effect if it was done really well and they like it. But typically speaking, they're going to take everything out and they're going to redo it to make it more professional and just better sounding. But yeah, so that's what that stuff means. If you did any effects, you want them to have those effects, how you did it, select that box, And then you also want to send them, I would say always send them a copy without the effects, just to give them more creative control. Even if you like the way it sounds, they can probably make it better than you can because they have more expertise in it. And if they can't, you can always just tell them to go back to the way you did it if you like it better. And there's a sample rate. Films typically at 4,800, so you can leave it there, or you can go to 9,600 if it's requested or needed. Bits per sample, higher, like matching the settings of the actual audio is the best. So, you know, if it's 16, but 24 is better. Typically, if it was recorded at that, you want to make sure to keep as much data and maintain it as possible. So just choose whatever it is. If you go over, it can help a tiny bit. It's not really going to affect too much, but if you go more, if you do a higher bit depth or a bit sample rate than you recorded at, it's not really going to add any data, but it is going to help a tiny bit whenever it's processed, so that it doesn't take out as much of the real information. It takes out some of that fluff that you added, but it's just going to be a bigger file size. So you have to decide, like, you know, how big that file size is going to be and how are you sending it to them. If you're sending it over online, or if you're sending it, you know, if they have access to it already, you know, how are you doing it? So how big is that file size and how big do you need it? Those are some things you want to consider, but you just want to try to keep the audio as high quality as possible when you're doing this. So I would just say pick the one that it was recorded at or higher. And then below that, you have files, which is separate audio. And that is where we're talking about where you can either embed it or you can separate it. And that would just mean that the separate audio is going to appear as their own files. So there's going to be a file for each different piece of audio, as well as the AAF file. And so they'll import the AAF and then they'll reconnect the audio, because it'll say like missing media or whatever. So they'll reconnect it to whatever audio is needed. So it's a bit more work, but they might, I don't know, they might request that for whatever reason. But if you do embed it instead of separate, it just means that all the audio and all of the AAF files all going to be in one file. So when they import that one file, they have everything, compared to having it all separate. And then the format, there's broadcast wave, or there's AIFF. From what I hear, broadcast wave is usually used more often, but that would really just depend on what the sound mixer wants. So that's just something you'd want to check with them before you do it. Then there's render, which is copy complete audio files. Choosing complete audio files is also something you want to do typically, which will allow the editor to see where you cut the audio at and adjust it if they'd like to expand the audio at the end or add extra audio at the beginning. Whereas if you choose the other option, which is on render, the other option is trim audio. And trim audio just means you are going to send them only the bits of audio that you edited and that you have in the timeline still. So basically, if you have an audio clip that was 30 seconds altogether, and you cut out the slate and you cut out the end where they say cut, right before they say cut, and now the clip is 22 seconds long. If you do completed audio files and send it over to them, they'll have the whole 30-second clip. It'll be in the timeline 22 seconds. So they'll still have it the same size, but they'll be able to grab either end of the file and expand it, because they'll have access to the whole clip. So if they want extra at the beginning for whatever reason, they'll be able to take the beginning of the file and bring it back and expand it more. But if you have trim audio that you're sending to them, then whatever they have on the timeline is all they get. They don't have access to the entire file unless they reconnect it. If they have access to the file on their computer or something like that. So obviously using the complete audio file is going to make the AAF file itself larger. It's going to have more data in it. So it's going to be a bigger export. And using the trim audio will be the opposite. It'll be smaller file size. But I don't know. Typically speaking, I would say always send them the complete audio because you might have cut it at a spot that doesn't really work to blend it together with the rest as well. And they'll have more options and opportunity to adjust that if they have access to the entire file, and they can just expand or retract it on the timeline instead of having to go back and find the clip that it's supposed to be attached to and readjust it and things like that. So embedded versus linked. Embedded is one large file size that contains both media and sequence data. The benefits is it's only one file to interchange between systems and it's easier to manage. Disadvantages is a longer import and export. Other than that, it's pretty much the exact same. Linked, it's separate sequence and media files, like I was saying. All the sound files will be on a separate, will have their own file, and then the AAF file will be something itself. Benefits, if the media is on a shared server, then it's easier just to send the sequence by itself. So you can export it and not send everything over. You can just send the AAF file, which won't actually have the sound. And then they'll be able to just quickly link it to the shared server. So that might be a little faster. But like that's only on like larger productions usually where you have a shared server, because those are pretty expensive. The disadvantages of linked is if the media is not on a shared server, like for most independent projects, then there are many files that must be transported between systems. Hopefully they're all, kept the same, organized the same, nothing's left out or forgotten. And it just takes a little bit longer to link it back in post. So like I said, embedded is usually used more often, but if it's specifically requested, you might want to do linked. A lot of this is just like whoever you're sending it to, just make sure that, you ask them what they want and then do whatever instructions they give. But it's just better to know like what to send in the AAF file and everything. If you're doing the audio yourself, then just set it up however you'd like and whatever you think would be the best way for you to bring it into Pro Tools or Ableton or whatever you're using for the audio. Last thing I'll say about this stuff is like OMF files, the older version of this. The reason it's not used as much is it doesn't export metadata. And it has a cap of like 2 gigabytes for the file size. So if you're doing a feature length film or something like that, you have a lot of audio. Or if you're doing a documentary and you have a lot of audio and there's a bunch of different channels or tracks, then it might come out to be more than 2 gigabytes. And if you were sending it with an OMF file for whatever reason, you're going to have to send separate files to get everything there. And you're going to max it at 2 gigabytes and then send another file with the rest of it to get everything to the sound department. Where AAF does have metadata and it doesn't have that low of a cap. So it's pretty much, you can use it for whatever project and it'll have all the information needed. But it'll, they do tend to have a little bit of trouble sometimes with certain softwares, because if you do have a very large file with 100,000 different elements to it, a lot of different audio pieces, it's harder to keep track of for everything. And so it's a little bit more taxing on the computer. And there can be some errors that are caused because of it. But for the most part, AAF is just used more often because you want to have that metadata. You want to be able to, especially in like Pro Tools and things like that, you can go up, you can have how long it is appear at the top. You can have the in and out points appear at the top of each file, the name of the files, things like that. So that's the kind of metadata that you want to keep everything in track keep everything organized anyway. And just make sure that you know what each piece of audio is and what it's for. And so that's where the metadata comes in. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to add about AAF or OMF files when transferring it over to audio from video? Last thing I'll say about it is like, you want to make sure that you have your picture locked. Before you're sending it to audio, make sure you're done with picture editing. You're not going to change the speed or the timeline of anything anymore with the picture, with like moving around the clips and things like that, because that'll adjust where the audio needs to be. So make sure that is completely done. Picture is locked, which means your final version of editing the picture around is complete, and you're not going to adjust any more of that. And you're going to send over your audio. Then you can start working on like visual effects and color grading and things like that while the sound department is working. But yeah, you always want to make sure you have your picture done, the adjustment, where the scenes are, where the clips are, how long they are. All of that stuff needs to be done before you send it off to anybody else to work on the next process of post-production.
And I would like to add is that sometimes when you're exporting this AF file, right, the effects that goes with it, sometimes they might sound okay to you, but when you're actually hearing it on the different system, professional system, it may not sound that good. So what the person who's receiving is he's the mix, who's doing the mix and all that. Looking at the sound effects, he may actually replace them with whatever he finds sound better. For that system that's probably going to be used in the theaters or bigger for bigger audience. So that's also there. So sometimes like your effects that you have worked on very laboriously, and then you will find them completely changed.
Yeah, because they don't work with whatever the mix is, or they just didn't sound good, or they just weren't quality. So
yeah, because I think most of the times when we are doing our mix, we're doing with like headphones and stuff like that, no matter how good the professional headphones are. But when you're actually looking at in a theater environment, because the actual professional mixer is going to be having a different environment. It's like a big screen, big hall kind of thing. So that's a whole lot of difference.
Yeah, and they'll be able to test it out on their good headphones as well as their good speakers, and like their environment they're in, what's specifically made for sound, so that they can really make sure it's all high standard, high quality. All right, so last thing I'll say is what we're going to study on Thursday. We're going to be talking about color correcting and color grading. They are two different things, so we're going to talk about what they are and what the differences are. We're actually going to be making an exercise out of color grading, so we'll be talking about that after probably like next Monday or something, or in an email after Thursday. We'll talk about lenses, what to look for when you're buying lenses for your camera. There's a bunch of different things that go into it. And so we'll talk about all those things and what they are, and some different brands that you might want to look at if you're trying to get lenses. And then editing using vector scopes and waveforms to help. This goes with color correcting and color grading. So, well, at least color correcting, if nothing else, to match skin tones and things like that. Make sure nothing's over or underexposed that you're not really noticing. So talk about those tools. We already talked about them using on set, but then you use them again in editing to make sure that everything's good to go after you're done with all the color adjustments that you've done. So that'll just pretty much blend together with the color correcting and color grading. Other than that, I just wanted to mention that what was it? I think it's the second editing style exercise, the one that's based on parallel editing or cross-cutting. It's going to be due April 7th, so just keep that in mind if you're going to take part. And you can either take scenes from other projects that have already been created, either of yours or just like a movie or something, and make it seem like they're coming from the same movie, the same project, the same scene. Or you can create something, record it yourself, and create a whole new thing if you like for that exercise. But it's just mainly about that editing style, which is a parallel editing, a cross-cutting, to either add comedic or dramatic elements to the scene. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to say before we say goodbye? Hopefully our internet is better next time so that I don't have to steal Priscilla's phone. Good thing that her phone was still working well enough for me to take it and go with it, even though my computer was messing up. But hopefully that doesn't happen again because it's kind of annoying. All right. Well, good night, everybody. Thank you all for coming, and hopefully see you guys all Thursday.